Hello everyone and welcome back to What a Barb, a Polin podcast. I'm Ovs. I have Lecky and Veg with me today. We were supposed to have a Bean. She has been pulled away by a family emergency. But I'm glad to have you both here. Are you both doing well?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I have exciting news.
Do you?
I am a guest star on a different podcast.
You bitch.
It's in the same wheelhouse.
Yeah, it is.
You're not betraying us though.
No, I'm not.
No.
So a friend of mine who I happen to know from my Merlin days.
Of course.
She has a podcast about Leonardo, the BBC 2011, the CBBC even, TV series.
For kids.
Oh.
Now, Jonathan Bailey is in that show as Leonardo.
Uh-huh.
And her podcast is called Fantastico, which he says a lot.
Fantastico.
And I don't know how the show had passed me by, but the whole point of it is like she's watching it with people who she's talked to a lot about the show, but they've never watched it. So she gets like the fresh perspective, which I thought was such a cool idea.
Yeah.
So I'm like slid into her DMs like, please, can I be on the podcast? Also, can you call me Veg instead of my name?
Also, I love Jonathan Bailey.
Yeah.
I am obsessed with this podcast. It sounds like the most fun passion project.
Yeah.
I had never heard of it either though. We must have been slightly too old or something for it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We must have just missed it.
It holds up, but it's no more for kids than Merlin, really. So it should have just been on regular BBC.
Yeah.
But she got the main, like one of the main characters, obviously not our beloved.
Not Jonathan Bailey.
The lovely JB.
Not yet. Not yet.
That would be great.
If he heard about that podcast, he would be all over it. Are you joking me?
But yeah, she had Alistair McGowan on, who is like a fairly well-known British actor. He was like the main villain in season 1. So that's exciting.
So cool.
So check it out.
And it's from years ago as well, isn't it? So like imagine being asked questions about something you did so long ago that someone's like reviving through a podcast. That's so much fun. So we will link to Fantastico in the show notes and we'll also let you know when it's out.
Yeah.
Our lovely Veg lending her lovely voice to the airwaves of another.
How are you guys doing?
My Lecky, did you get your hair cut?
I did get my hair cut yesterday. Oh, I actually have a really cute story.
Aw.
I think I've told you in the past that there was one time I went and my hair was like so messy. I got caught on their like plants that were on the wall.
Oh,
In the
yeah.
display. She was just attached.
I remember.
She just became a fixture.
Yeah. This was a better trip. There was this dad here with his young daughter, and I go to like a curly hair salon. They like specialize in curls generally. And he was there to learn how to care for his daughter's curly hair. And he was like asking all these questions. He was super into it. And then at the very end, when she was like taking in her final look, he was like, there your curls are. And I was like, that's just the sweetest thing I've ever seen.
Did you cry?
No.
Oh, that's so sweet.
How are you, Obs?
I'm all right. Just enjoying the sun. Hasn't London been lovely?
It has been lovely. I had a lovely picnic yesterday.
Oh, cute.
It's beautiful weather, so just enjoying that. But happy to have you both on the pod. By the time this comes out, I don't know when it will come out, but by the time it will come out, we will have probably passed 2 significant anniversaries.
Okay.
One is the release of season 3 part 2 on the 13th of June. So happy birthday, season 3 part 2.
Delightful.
Happy birthday.
I'm sure we did some sort of story for you. We did something to celebrate. Also, to Dum was probably passed. So we're recording this now in May, so I've no idea what happened.
Mark yourself as a survivor.
Good luck. Whatever happened.
We've survived.
I don't think we got anything to do. We got the news just now.
Yeah.
That was, oh, hey, baby.
They're just repeating it. Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Veg's cat is just walking across the frame. And then the last but very significant milestone that we've hit is, funnily enough, the exact same day that season 3 part 2 came out is actually our podiversary.
Penelope, what's a Barb? What's a Barb?
This was a complete accident, of course. We never knew.
Yeah. We didn't plan it that way.
No, I mean, profit high, stand down, babe. We've got this covered.
Yeah.
But happy 2 years to the podcast. Yeah. Oh my God. So happy birthday, What a Barb. What a birthday.
What a birthday.
So we are finally getting around to beginning our part 2 of Rewatch with the beginning of episode 5. But before we do, Lecky, can you take us through the breaking crumbs of the week? Hello, Lecky. It's late for us. It has been a while since we recorded Crumbs, or an episode. Apologies, everyone. I don't think we planned on there being such a gap between our episodes, because we did have an inbuilt plan for something called Ta-dum.
It let us down once again.
We knew that like May and June was going to be really hard for us to put an episode out because we were like doing different things. And we had like this tiny gap around Ta-dum where we were like, would have been able to do it. Now, bear in mind, Ta-dum started at 1 a.m. for me.
Right.
We sat on that live stream for like nearly 3 hours.
Yes.
Waiting, recording.
Yes, there's a recording of us just waiting.
The most boring recording of me just pestering Lecky going, who's that person? What show is this? Because I don't watch anything. So I was like, what's happening? So apologies if you've been waiting. Tudum did its tudumming.
And this also ended up being a very, very long episode that we are still working on.
Oh my God. We're in the trenches with episode 5, I tell you now.
Yeah.
A lot has been happening, but we're here. And what perfect timing, because there are actual crumbs.
Some crumbs have arrived.
Real life crumbs. Not all recent, not all new, but they're here nonetheless. So take it away, Lek. What's been going on?
Tudum, as we said, was a total bust, but thankfully we have recently received some season 4 crumbs.
Boop, boop.
On Friday, the Bridgerton social media accounts posted a video announcing the end of filming on season 4. The video showed various cast members arriving at their trailers in costume before changing and leaving set. We're not exactly sure where the clips were filmed. It's definitely over a few different days. You can see they are sometimes on location and sometimes at the studio lot. As for when they were filmed, we think filming wrapped in late May, but it's hard to narrow down to an exact date range.
Mm-hmm.
But the video showed Luke Thompson, Yaren Ha, Hugh Sachs, Will Tilston, Golda Rochevelle, Emma Naomi, Martin Zimong-Bay, Michelle Mao, Isabella Wei, Katie Leung, Geraldine Alexander, Ollie Higginson, Adjoa Ando, Florence Hunt, Masali Beduza, Hannah Dodd, and of course, Nicola Coughlan. Fans might be disappointed not to have seen other cast members, including Luke Newton, Claudia Jesse, Simone Ashley, Jonathan Bailey, and Polly Walker. However, we've seen these kind of videos before, and they don't give an indication of how involved any one cast member will be in the season, just who was on set on the days that they were filmed. So rest assured, I'm certain we'll be seeing plenty of our favorite characters, except maybe John, who isn't in the video and probably dies this season, but everyone else should make it out okay.
Fly high with the angels, probably John. Anything else of interest in the video, Lek?
So everyone looked incredible in all their costumes, but there are a few interesting points to pick up on. Firstly, we have another new look for Penelope. Her dress is actually very, very similar to the one she is wearing in the scene with Eloise from, I think it's episode 404, when they're out shopping with their books in hand. We've stared at the pattern for a long time and think it might be the same dress because there's some like scalloped edges on the hem and at her bust line.
There's been like embellishment comparison happening.
But it just looks a little peachier in the natural lighting. So we think it's the same dress. I mean, it wouldn't be a shock for our sustainability queen to be having a little reduce, reuse, recycle moment in season 4. But even if it is the same dress, it's definitely from a different scene as Penelope is debuting a new hairstyle. It's sort of a half up, half down look with little pieces twisted back into her bun. It's very much in keeping with the other glimpses we've seen so far for Pen, pirate costume aside.
The mature mother look.
Yes. Other things of note, it looks as though Sophie is wearing a Bridgerton blue dress, so welcome to the family, Sophie.
Yay!
Gregory, meanwhile, is adorably dressed like a miniature Antony, complete with his very own watch fob. A few of our listeners were messaging us about this point, specifically to share that men usually wore watch fobs when they were entering adulthood around 17 or 18 years old. This could be a sign that there is a time jump in season 4, something fans have long suspected given the timeline of an offer from a gentleman.
Lecky, what's your best guess? How long's the time jump going to be? Because I feel like there is going to be one, but they could either do the couple of years if they wanted to kind of, you know, move the story along and grow everyone up a little bit. Or it could just be they could condense it into a few months. What's your feeling?
I think maybe a few months, at most a year. I think that Gregory sporting this new watch fob is like a sign that he's growing up and becoming a man.
He's going to Eton.
Yeah, he's going to Eton. So maybe they gave him one like even when he goes off to school, even though that's not maybe technically correct.
Bridgerton not being historically correct.
Yes.
Stop it.
So that's what I think is happening, that this is kind of just a representation that he's growing up and becoming a man.
He looks so like Anthony, though. It's so funny. I was trying to find like the exact scene from season 2 that he looks like. It's just him exactly. He even has like the double-breasted waistcoat that is such an Anthony style.
202, when the rest of the family is going off to the Danbury Ball and he has his hands on his hips. Maybe that one a little bit. But the other interesting part about this video is that when you see Katie Leung entering her trailer, the sign on the door reads Lady Araminta Gunn, the character name that has previously been confirmed by Netflix and Shondaland. However, when she steps out of the trailer in a clip that was clearly taken on another day, the sign now reads Lady Araminta Gao. A little digging shows that oddly a few news articles from February used Gao as Araminta's surname instead of Gunn, so we're not entirely sure what this name change means. Will Araminta marry halfway through the season, have protection tried out out a couple of different names for the character. At the table read for Block 1, Araminta was still called Lady Araminta Gunningworth, so there's so many possibilities, but it's very interesting.
What are you pinning your thoughts on?
What do I think? My initial thought was that maybe that was her surname before she got married.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe she was even married to somebody else.
It could even be a flashback. It would be very unusual for them to change the name halfway through, though. They normally haven't done that. Even for like when Kate got married, there was points where production would still refer to her by her maiden name.
Yeah, my other thought was that maybe for some reason she has her last name like stripped from her, but that's kind of weird because she still has the lady title.
Yeah.
And then you pointed out that...
Did I?
Yes, you pointed out that maybe they just hadn't finalized her name. So that scene of her exiting the trailer could have even been earlier in the season after she'd been listed as Gunningworth, but before they settled on Gunn. So that's what I think actually happened, especially because we'll discuss the season 4 table read a little later in Crumbs.
In just a moment, actually.
Yes, but Posey in that picture, her last name is Ruan. So it was even before they settled on Lee as the last name for the stepsisters. So I think that maybe it was initially Gal and they changed it to Gunn.
Because the news articles that were calling her Gal seem to have come from the metadata of a photo that was released around Valentine's Day. And so maybe it was originally that name. That's where the news articles have got it from.
Yeah. When the photo was taken by Liam Daniel. Yeah.
And then since then, it's been changed. Very interesting, though. One to keep an eye on. Speaking of the season 4 table read, we randomly decided to be doing a bit of crumbs hunting retrospectively, haven't we, Lek?
Yes. So just to take a little trip down memory lane, several months ago, we received a little photo of the Bridgerton season 4 table.
Half a year ago.
The season 4 table read. On the table, you can actually see one of the scripts, and Obs, who isn't feeling well, decided we should inspect it in a little more detail.
Yeah, I've literally had a fever, and I was like, in the height of a fever, I was like, I'm going to commit myself to staring at this very blurry. And it was like...
Clouds parted, an epiphany happened.
Yeah, I mean, did I actually? We will see.
So we decided to inspect it in a little more detail, and here's what we can make out. We think this is a conversation from either 401 or 402, and I'll explain why a bit later, but we're pretty sure that Brimsley is speaking, especially since Hugh Sachs is actually holding his script aloft in the photo. Excellent detective work, I'm sure you'll all agree. And that this is a scene between Brimsley and Lady Danbury. You'll notice that Adjoa is also closely reading the scene, but anyway, here's what we were able to make out, with some paraphrasing here and there. So Brimsley says, Lady Danbury, there was a time when you were her lady in waiting. And then I think he says something about her willfulness, but I'm not.
It's blurry. We'll share a picture and you'll be like, how are you reading anything from this?
Yeah, but Obs made this next bit out pretty clear. She was different. You were different. And then something about Lady Danbury being there for Queen Charlotte, who will now be close to... And then there's something about somebody whose name starts with Lady A, possibly Lady Araminta. I think it reads either receive or require Lady Araminta. After that, it starts to get even more sketchy.
Starts to get...
But I think Brimsley says something to the effect of, you know, Charlotte, and that she'll be struggling. And then there's the word friend at the end thrown in there. So this screams to me, and I could be wrong, but I think it's a scene between Brimsley and Lady Danbury after the death of King George, when he's basically telling Lady Danbury that the Queen is adrift and basically needs a friend. And maybe that even Lady Danbury may need to help receive Lady Araminta in the Queen's absence, perhaps after one of the Lee sisters is named the Diamond, is what I'm thinking. It's just a theory.
It's very interesting, very blurry scene, but it does sound like Brimsley is trying to advocate for the Queen.
By reminding Lady Danbury of their history.
Yeah, which we've heard that the history between them is going to be important. We've heard that we're going to see sides to the Queen that we've not really seen before. And so the King dying would bring out all those different complicated emotions for her. And it would be interesting if maybe she was acting strange or lashing out in her grief. And Brimsley is there to remind Lady Danbury, you've been there for her. You've seen her through all these stages of life. She needs you now. And then, of course, in that little clip that we saw with the season 4 video, on Queen Charlotte's dress, there seems to be like a painting of George.
A portrait of George, yeah.
It looks very similar to a historical painting of actual King George III. So it's been very interesting.
And then if you remember in that little trailer they showed us, there was like the empty chair. I know we're reading into an empty chair, but like it looks like it was symbolism for maybe the death of a monarch.
I mean, it's a season of death anyway. Who isn't dying this season would probably be a shorter list.
Right.
So King dying, maybe episode 2 or end of episode 1?
Okay, so the table reads they usually do 2 scripts at a time, and this was very early in the shoot, so we think they were going over episodes 1 and 2, and it looks like either 1 or 2, we can't really make it out, but I think, and Obs believes too, that this scene takes place in episode 402. It seems like the Keen's shocking death might work at the very end of episode 401, and that a conversation like this might take place the following episode in 402.
If the time jump is at the end of episode 1, that'd be interesting.
But there's something funky happening with, is it episode 2? Remember they had the
If you say something strange is happening in a Bridgerton timeline.
with the clapperboard. Remember that was episode 402 with Sophie returning to the Bridgerton house.
And Benedict returning back. Oh, he's like picked her up from somewhere.
Yeah.
Because the Queen wasn't wearing black, was she? And if she was in immediate mourning, she'd have to be dressed in black.
Yeah. So the dress where she's wearing the portrait of George, that may be after her mourning period, after a time jump.
Again, who knows how accurate any of that was. We will share the blurs and you can make your own decisions, guys.
And you can come back and laugh about this after the show comes out. In cast news, Jonathan Bailey was recently interviewed by The Hollywood Reporter, during which he looked back on his experience of joining Bridgerton from his initial audition all the way through to leading the show. Fans will be so pleased to know that Johnny confirms that he has no plans to leave the show. He said, "I've never been someone who's like, thanks, bye, it's not in my nature," hinting that he is happy to continue playing a supporting role for many years to come. "There's a real sense of brotherly pride I feel in it," he continued, before dropping a season 4 crumb that he was recently filming a wedding for the show. "People know that people get married in Bridgerton. That's not a spoiler, right?" he said.
I can imagine like the blood draining from his face as he realised that he anyone's wedding, anyone's. But yeah, I think we've known for a while that they filmed a wedding recently.
So this is just confirming it. The interview continued, while acknowledging that there may be a future season when the scheduling doesn't work or the storyline may not require Anthony. Johnny's been happy to continue watching his co-stars from the wings. "I look forward to, in another however many years, when we've done the 8th season, to sit around and be like, look what we all did together.
Aww.
I know how much I love long-running series. I know how important familiarity of character and story and consistency is in these long-running series." That is right, Johnny. Thank you.
Look at that. What a guy.
Yeah.
And I love this, like, however many years. He knows he's in it for the long haul. And that is what we want, isn't it?
The consistency.
Yeah, if people go off and they're not in every single season or whatever, then that's fine. But I think we all want, in the end...
see them again.
Yeah, and for it to sort of be pulled together as one whole story.
Good news all around.
Very happy with that.
What's on Netflix have also shared a few new cast members for season 4, including Francesca Lara Gordon as Virginia, Hersha Verity as Lady Dillingham. That's a great name, Hersha Verity. Sorry. Adam Hashmi as Lord Adams, Carl James Wilson as Constable Turner.
Very interesting.
Oh, because Sophie gets
spoiled.
well, James Vaughn as Dr. Lewiston, Fred Woodley Evans as
a doctor.
Oh, a doctor. Oh. I'm thinking John. Who are you thinking? It could be John. It could be the king.
So many people aren't in full health this season.
Is the death going to be a surprise, or is someone going to fall ill and require a doctor?
I think the king could be ill.
Then John's death will come as more surprise.
I think John's death has to come as a surprise. I mean, it does. He's so young. And in the book, sorry, but people, spoilers, etc. Half of the devastation comes from like how utterly unexpected it was. I mean, it's awful in the book.
Yeah. And also, it would be like darkly comic if they ran in there with the doctor and tried to like revive him or something.
You know, anyone could be falling ill. You know what the show's like.
Yeah.
I think we might need a mortician for John, to be honest. I don't know the doctor's going to be massively helpful, but nice to have him on board. Welcome, James.
Moving on, we also have Fred Woodley Evans as Hendrix, Alejandra Dean as Miss Alvarez, Rini Boeja as an Indian princess, and Lady Divine as an extra. Another great name there, by the way. Lady Divine. That should just be her name in the show.
Brilliant cast members. Welcome on board, everyone.
So we don't know how prominent any of these roles will be, but welcome to the cast. Benefit fans will be particularly interested, as we said, in the role of Constable Turner, I'm sure.
Absolutely. I mean, we saw that prison carriage outside Bridgerton House, didn't we?
Elsewhere, the show's music supervisor, Justin Camps, recently spoke with Deadline as part of their 5 songs series. Justin shared the behind-the-scenes process for choosing and licensing some of the songs for season 3, and shared his thoughts on the most significant song, Give Me Everything, unsurprisingly, as well as the challenges of finding just the right songs for the show, especially for the balls. It's a fascinating article, so we'll link it down in our show notes for you to go and read.
Editing Obs here, just dropping in with a couple of extra crumbs that have dropped since Lecky and I recorded this segment. Firstly, Adjoa Ando was honoured at the Italian Global Series Festival earlier this week, during which there was a slightly interesting incident with Deadline. So Deadline were reporting on the event, and in an article published on Tuesday, they said that Adjoa Ando is set to appear in season 2 of spin-off series Queen Charlotte: A Bridgerton Story. This obviously came as a surprise to everyone who had no idea that there was a season 2 of Queen Charlotte. And after a little flurry of excitement, Deadline hastily retracted their statement in at least 2 amendments to the original article, which ultimately clarified that a season 2 had not been greenlit and that Adjoa had not actually confirmed the series. So there's a bit of an up and down there. It is still a little bit suspicious that Deadline misreported season 2 so clearly in the first instance. We will keep an eye on that. I think we'd all be intrigued to see what a season 2 would look like and who a story would focus on. So no spin-off just yet, but we will keep listening. And then secondly, Polly Walker was featured in an article by an Italian news outlet where she talked about season 4. Now, the translation isn't exact, so apologies, but speaking of Portia's arc in season 4, Polly said she hasn't changed much in the new season. She's as complicated as ever. Portia has a very intense relationship with her servant. Something happens and she gets involved in her usual intrigues. There is always a challenge for her, but she triumphs and always manages to come out victorious. We're always here for victorious Portia for one, but everyone was very interested by the discussion of an intense relationship with a servant. Are we having maid wars over Varley? If so, we are unbelievably seated. In our next crumbs, I'll try and get Lecky to have a bit more of a chat about what all of this could mean, but we're certainly interested in a little Portia update, as always. Back to the rest of the crumbs, though.
And lastly, in a bit of merch news, Loungefly has released an exclusive 2-piece Bridgerton collection, including a blue and white backpack patterned with the family crest and the Bridgerton house. And there is also a Lady Whistledown themed card holder featuring the issue where Edwina left Antony at the altar. Lovely.
Bit of history there for you, isn't it? Which Whistledown issue would you get on a purse, like? What's your iconic Whistledown?
Ooh, I don't know. First one.
The first one. There's a good one.
Because it's like introducing Lady Whistledown and like the type of character she is.
Yeah, it is a bit iconic. Which one would I go? I mean, it would be funny to have the one where she calls Colin. What does she call him?
Oh, that would be a good one. Yeah, the one from 301. Does he even know who he is? Yeah, that one.
I think that would be quite funny.
That would.
Well, thanks, Lek. Because we had so many crumbs, we couldn't go into any non-Bridgerton crumbs today.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
And strap in for a very long episode.
Production's ended. Prepare yourself for more of the wilderness. But to keep you occupied, let's pass the time with a clock and a mirror. What have we got? It's 3:05. Do we currently have 3:05 at the time of recording?
We don't actually have the clock this episode, but it's all right.
We have recorded this episode in about 8 different recording sessions.
Yeah, it's a long one.
I think she's cursed, ultimately.
Yeah.
We love the episode. She is not being kind to us. So enjoy whatever comes to you, especially Colin. He's having a great time enjoying what comes to him this episode.
That is in this episode.
By hook or by crook, that will be in this episode. If you're a fan of charades, then don't listen to this episode.
Hold your horses. Yeah.
It's not here, babe. I'm getting very, very warm. It's been very hot and I've had a fever all week. So with that, let's go to the past version of us and a vegetable and start the ticking of the clock.
No clock in this episode. You keep doing that.
Well, enjoy. Clock, no clock. Have a great time, guys. Bye. Okay, hey guys, we finally made it. We're sorry for like the month interlude or whatever it's been since we dropped part 5,000 of our episode 4 rewatch. But we had other matters to attend to and we wanted to keep the immersive experience. You know, we had to wait a month for part 2 to be released back last year. You guys had to wait for part 2 of our rewatch to hit. So we are starting today with episode 5, TikTok. We're moving to a new director for this block, Billy Woodruff, who will take the reign on episode 5 and 6. And the writer of this episode is Azy Esquire. Now, guys, can you remember your first reactions to seeing this episode? Veg, you and I went to London premiere, so we actually saw this episode.
We did.
On the big screen.
Yeah.
What an episode to see large, I'll tell you now.
What an experience.
Yeah, we talked about going to the premiere some point last year, but with the episode itself, my overriding reaction of seeing the episode was coming out, and I think I messaged Lecky and Beans and I was like, oh my god, that was one of the best episodes I've ever seen.
Yeah, I watched it for the first time with you and you'd already seen it. I loved this episode.
So did you watch the early release? Because it was released early, wasn't it? It was released like the day before.
No, because like, wasn't there like a live stream or something like that? And I think we were up late working on something. So I watched a bit of the live stream. I was trying to spot obs and veg, which I did at one point. It was really fun. But I think the screening was delayed for some reason.
There was something going on, wasn't there?
And it was delayed to the point where I was like, I just have to take a nap. I haven't had much sleep. I'll just watch it when it comes out.
Yeah, and we'd been bombarding you with like, we talked to Bert Seymour about Fife. And like,
Yeah.
So I think, we watched it together when it was released.
Yeah, we were clutching each other for quite a lot of it.
Oh,
Honestly, like, there are so many points.
As soon as there was a hint of clothes coming off, you were like, don't fucking touch me.
I couldn't look at veg.
that must have been so fun to see it in the theater, though. Like, despite the embarrassment, like, 'cause even when watching it at home, you feel like you're intruding on that scene. But like for the rest of the episode, I can't imagine how fun that must have been, like to be in like the theater, because there's something about a movie theater environment where you're watching things with other people that just kind of makes it so much more magical.
It was magical.
People were like cheering and stuff. I remember when Colin had to go at Penn.
Portia.
Save that for later in the later on. When he had to go at Portia, like people were cheering. And then I remember when they kind of laid down on the chaise and like he joined her, like everyone was like, oh. And it was like this really supportive, really beautiful atmosphere. Yeah, it was gorgeous. And then, me and Veg kept like clutching at each other whenever Colin said something incredible, which was like every 3 minutes. And then during the sex scene, like I put my hands up and I was like, Veg, I can't look at you. I was like, I love you, I cannot see you. But it is a masterpiece of an episode.
Yeah.
Like I say, I remember getting out and being like, that was one of the best episodes of the show that we've ever seen, like technically. And it's so funny that we had to wait a whole month between part 1 and part 2 because we'd seen the trailer at the end of part 1.
Yeah.
And I think the clips were mostly from episode 5. We had an episode called What a Race Against Time, if you want to hear our reactions to like the part 2 trailer.
Which Beans didn't watch. And remembered halfway, like an hour into our recap of the trailer.
She was like, have I seen this?
She was like, guys, I don't think I've seen this. And I was like, how have you been on a call for like 90 minutes? And you have been talking so passionately and insightfully about this trailer you've never laid eyes on.
Yeah, amazing.
Oh, we love you, Beans.
Yeah.
But I think it totally holds up. It's so well directed. The writing and pacing is super tight. And I've always felt it feels like a really unusual episode of the show. It feels like some points are happening almost in real time, especially at the engagement scene.
Yeah.
It's a little bit darker in some points and just beautifully done. So we've decided to split this rewatch into 2 parts. For a start, we had the infamous mirror scene to cover, but I think also the episode kind of naturally falls into 2-ish. So today we'll be covering everything from the engagement announcement up until we might actually change the plan. Basically, it took me so long to write this that I've like done my back in.
Oh.
And it's also really late. So we will record until we record and then the rest will be next episode.
Yeah.
But yes, I was talking to you about this, Lecky, earlier, that the episode feels really intimate in a lot of ways. We have the mirror scene, of course, naturally. But I think what's interesting about certainly the part of the episode we're covering today, there aren't really massive set pieces or like huge society events. I mean, even the engagement soiree itself is really intimate. And I think it's a very character-focused episode with a lot of quiet conversations.
Yes.
People reacting, people catching up. And it's all like our core family as well. And I really love that part of it. And it's always so good to have the family back together. Sans, Daphne, rest in peace.
Yeah, this is like one of those episodes where you really let the characters shine and incorporate a lot of like character-driven drama.
Character studies.
Yeah.
With like Portia reacting and everything. And it's all just so well done.
Yeah.
It's really great when you have these moments when even members of the supporting cast can really show off their acting chops and dig into the compelling drama that they and we have been given.
I think what I love about the show so much is that there is not a single weak link in the cast.
Yeah.
They're just always absolutely on point. Oh my God, Veg's cat is just filling the screen. It's incredible. Look at you.
She's causing a lot of trouble.
She's beautiful though.
She's just drunk out of my water cup.
Oh, and look at that. A cat.
There's her bum hole for you guys.
Now, we thought the mirror scene was intimate. Jesus. Thank you for that, Punks. That's beautiful.
Okay. I don't think they want to see that, Angel.
There we go.
One of our Patreon members had a really funny idea. During your coverage of episode 5, this was Heelskay, it would be funny to add a little sound effect to denote moments when Penn could have told Colin the truth about Whistledown. I'm just going to include that sound effect here because we could have hidden the butthole.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, like passive aggressively throughout our part 2 rewatch, every time she could have.
Yeah.
So anytime she appears on screen in the same vicinity of Colin, we're like... Oh, babe, we will get there. But Lady Veg, can you give us our episode summary?
Dearest gentle listener, a wondrous announcement has made it to the ton. Colin Bridgerton and Penelope Featherington are engaged.
At fucking last.
The Featheringtons are bamboozled, the ton surprised, and the Bridgertons elated, with one exception. Eloise Bridgerton reels and warns Penelope that her brother will never truly love her until the truth about her identity is out. The happy family news continues as our Viscount and Viscountess return with a growing fetus in tow.
Hi, Edmund.
But life isn't as happy for Cressida, who discovers she must marry a boring and aging but healthy lord. Episode 5 is a wonderful episode of PR for Colin Bridgerton. And a chance for Colin naysayers to rethink their position. He tells Penelope he loves her as soon as he learns that's a thing, defends her against a patronising Portia, shows her around a new house, compliments her in front of a mirror, and gently takes her virginity.
Well,
Gently. Fucking hell.
Gently.
There's a certain amount of ramming going on there for a second, I think.
we'll get there.
So will Colin, believe me.
Anyway, but when the Queen announces a £5,000 reward for unmasking the Ton's gossip monger and Eloise sets her midnight deadline, time closes in on Penelope Featherington. Or should I say, Lady Whistledown.
Thank you, Lady Veg.
Yeah.
Let's get started. We open part 2 to find our dear Penelope sat at her writing desk, quill in hand, as she begins to write a new Whistledown. As Julie Andrews says the infamous words,
Dearest reader.
Penelope pauses from her writing, seemingly caught in her thoughts, and immediately, we're opening with a question. Our lovely Moon Pie has asked us, what about the dearest reader rather than dearest gentle reader off the top of the episode? Do you think it was an indication that Pen was distracted? Or did she think her readers wouldn't be gentle about her engagement?
Oh, I love both of those points.
Whoa! Didn't even think of that.
You know what? Girl has just had some revelations that night. She's felt things she's not felt before. She's a little frazzled.
Yeah, I think she's distracted, but that last question, I feel like subconsciously maybe she does worry about how they may react to the engagement.
And I think she's kind of being a bit harsh on herself as well, as we'll get to, because she looks kind of not too happy.
Yeah.
She definitely doesn't look as thrilled as you might expect for a girl writing about her engagement to the love of life in Whistledown.
She didn't even really say yes. So, I mean, like...
Well, Moon Pie, we will circle back, but thank you for that. But how is Pen looking, Veg?
Well, here we see Pen in her nightdress and gown with a sweet pink ribbon in her hair, part of the course for her writing in a hurry lookbook, I'd say. We did think pink denoted secrets in Lady Whistledown at some point.
Yeah? Always a point.
And she's made it home from her exciting night in the carriage and the Bridgerton house. She's dressed for bed, which we're honestly quite impressed at, that she managed to sort of get properly changed. No rest for the wicked, though, and obviously, I mean, wicked cool because Penelope can do no wrong.
Veg working the Penelope PR chain there.
For Penelope Yaysayers.
Yeah, sorry. So, as well as her nightdress and gown, she's also wearing an interesting expression on her face. Maybe a little sad.
Yeah. Pen definitely looks slightly more morose than we would have hoped for, given that part 1 ended on a marriage proposal from Colin. Did Penelope not accept? Did something go wrong after the proposal? Is Penelope actually a time traveler, just like Debbling? We'll have to wait to find out. She definitely looks beautiful, though. I love any nighttime version of Penelope. Her nightdresses and robes are always so lovely.
Stunning. But you're right, Lecky, there is something oddly familiar about this Penelope as she looks back on the events of earlier that night. What exactly happened once Colin dropped the proposal? Did Pen fall flat on her face like her book counterpart? Did Colin ever get round to washing his hands? We're about to find out.
Fortunately, we find Penelope...
No, we're not.
We find Penelope still upright as Colin leads her through the gates of Bridgerton House. He briefly drops her hand to write his jacket. He was unsurprisingly a little rumpled post-carriage, so he needs to make himself a little more presentable for showing up at his family home at midnight with his new fiancé in tow. But I really like the way Penelope sort of staggers to a halt when Colin drops her hand. She's looking up at the house before her, very clearly still in shock from everything that's just happened.
Yeah, it's been quite the night for Miss Penelope, and it's far from over yet. I would even say there's sort of apprehension in her face. This obviously has gone so much faster than she's able to process. And we even get some wonderful Regency breathing from Pen here. So, Beans, wherever you are, I'm sure you're thrilled at the heaving chest. But I guess the question on everyone's lips is, did Penelope actually accept Colin's proposal or not? Well, some of our Patreon members have been asking us about this. Sasha says, Penelope makes a little bit of a face when Colin says they're engaged when they're in the house. Is that because she didn't, in fact, technically accept his proposal? So when she hears it out loud for the first time, it's just sort of hitting in her a way that's barely starting to sink in? Another of our listeners, Denise, said, okay, but do we think Penn actually said yes to Colin after he asked, or did Chaos Colin just sweep her down the walkway into the house and make the announcement? Do the scripts point to this at all? Felt like a little mystery the show left in.
I think we touched on this a little bit at the ending of our 304 rewatch, but it's an interesting question to consider. The script says that this is a direct pickup from 304, meaning we pick up right where we left off last episode. The scene description indicates that Penelope is, quote, in a daze as Colin helps her out of the carriage, saying, Colin asked her to marry him. Nothing feels real, almost as if we're underwater. Sounds are muffled. We're in slow-mo as Colin leads her toward the house, smiling back at her. So it seems like Colin never gave her an opportunity to answer. And I kind of like this because it's very Colin of him, and it helps Penn remain a bit more sympathetic as she wrestles with the Lady Whistledown issue over the next few episodes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially what you say about it making Penelope's perspective a little bit more sympathetic.
Yeah.
Because I think it really emphasises how swept away she becomes by everything that happens in this episode. It all unfolds before she has time to process any of it. And you really have to think about how quickly this all happens. She literally started that day thinking she would end up engaged to Debling, and she was coming to terms with that life. And since then, she's lived 1,000 other lives and felt 1,000 wildly different emotions since then. If you watch episode 4 and episode 5 right after one another, you're like, Jesus fucking Christ, this poor girl just had the most insane 24 hours of her life. I mean, she's going to end the next day pregnant, guys. Things are happening. So I think it makes complete sense that she is thrown and has to spend the rest of the episode catching up with Colin's chaotic actions. And on the topic of Colin, I think it also works better if Penelope didn't actually verbally accept his proposal. You can see he's so swept up in his happiness that he doesn't really notice here that she didn't overtly accept. But episode 5 is laced with all of these moments where you see Colin's growing sense that something is wrong with Penelope. In his perspective, in his sort of worst case scenario state, he's thinking, is she actually into this as much as I am? I mean, after all, he laid out in the carriage with his love confession. He said everything. He bore his heart open to her. And all she really said was she wanted to be so much more than friends. And it might not hit him in this moment, but I think later in the episode, he would look back at this and realise that she didn't actually say yes. And then that plays into all these insecurities that keep building. And also, Chaos Colin, of course he would just think that she's accepted.
Chaos Colin.
But for now, our boy is on cloud 9 as he pauses to look back at Penn, takes her hand and gently leads her into the family home. As the script described, we really do get into that slow-mo underwater feeling as they walk into the house. The showrunner Jess Brownell talked about how intentional this choice was, telling the Bridgerton podcast that they wanted to create an effect of Penn being caught up in a dream or feeling like she's on a boat, very, very surreal, real out-of-body experience, before the sudden record scratch moment where Eloise brings Penelope crashing back down to reality.
As Penn is led into the house, the show uses canted angles to highlight her unease and to demonstrate how stunned she is by the situation, just as Jess is describing. The camera focuses in on her face as they walk down the Bridgerton hallway, only cutting away to show Colin looking back at her in reassurance as he leads her confidently ahead. She then hangs back at the doorway of the drawing room as we hear the sound of her heartbeat, further highlighting her nervousness and how disoriented she is.
I think this episode uses a set of Bridgerton house in a really interesting and kind of unique way. Combined with those scenes of Penelope panicking at the end of the episode at the engagement ball, this is the only time that the house has felt, to me, almost malevolent or foreboding. You can really feel the weight of the situation on Penelope, and I think the cinematography and the lighting and the directing create this almost topsy-turvy, inverted world of the Bridgerton house, which is usually so warm
and inviting
and reassuring. And as she said, she's found it all so comforting before. I think they really achieved that well. And I think it would have been easy for the show to have filmed it in like a blissful, I feel like I'm in a dream right now kind of thing, where she's so happy that the reality hasn't crashed down. But I think she's just so thrown that you can see her in this completely frozen state. I mean, if we were in Colin's perspective, they'd be like butterflies and rainbows and angels singing choral songs. But Penelope's perspective is fraught with shock. Veg, what has Lady Whistledown got to say about all this?
Dearest reader, while most seasons of our fair marriage mart follow a predictable pattern, this author likes it most when there is a surprise. It is said that surprise is 1 part secrecy and 1 part speed. And last night, an announcement came with great speed indeed. As season 2 Benedict would say, I hope for Penelope's sake the tendency stops before the honeymoon.
Yeah, Colin, leave your speed at the door, babe. Well, she'll be the secrecy if he'll bring the speed. And dear Chaos Colin is not wasting any time in making his grand announcement to the residents of the Bridgerton living room.
We are engaged.
It's so distorted. engaged. I love how he just throws his arms out, but we're engaged.
Yeah.
Okay, I do have to give a shout out to the moment just before Colin announces the engagement, when he turns back to Penelope and squeezes her hand in reassurance. The world is still tilted on its axis for Penelope, with her heartbeat pounding over the sounds of the room and distorting Colin's words.
It's interesting, isn't it, though, how many moments in episode 5, Colin is constantly reassuring Penelope in one capacity or another. Like, no matter what the situation is, like, he's like checking back on her, he's looking at her, he's standing up for her, he's telling her everything. And she's giving him nothing.
Yeah.
And it's not because she doesn't feel it. I mean, she's literally loved him her entire life, but you can totally understand why he is panicking at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, first of all, this is just classic Chaos Colin, as we say, just rocking back up to his house in the middle of the night, no warning, and just shouting out, we're engaged, to the entire room. And he just throws his arms out. He's just so pleased and relieved. And I love the way that everything, so that's, Pen's heartbeat, like you were saying, that's pounding in her ears, even the dialogue, the music, it all completely pauses for this moment. And it's just silent for this breath before Violet turns around, gasps, and then that beautiful scoring from Chris Bowers kicks in.
Yeah.
I love this sequence for so many reasons, but I really have to give a shout out to the music here at this particular piece. It's called A Surprise.
Oh.
Very sweet. And then the music at the end of the scene is All Will Be Well. So beautiful. One of my favourite parts of the entire score.
I also really love this scene, especially how sweet this moment is, with Hyacinth and Violet's reactions especially, and Penelope's reaction to their enthusiasm. Violet quickly looks between Colin and Penelope and gasps in delight. Francesca and a dress-for-bed Hyacinth both stare at Colin for a moment before Hy barrels straight into Penelope, wrapping her in a vice-tight hug.
It's really cute, especially the way Penelope is sort of taken aback by Hyacinth's affection. She's probably never experienced anything like this with her sisters before. So it's definitely food for her soul.
Yeah.
When is the last time that girl got a hug? Can we carbon date it, please? And I also think it's sweet how Hyacinth is taller than Pen. And she's just nearly knocked backwards. Meanwhile, Fran is immediately embracing her brother, and you can hear all of their laughter, especially Colin's, filling the room. As Colin looks back at Penelope, he notices that Hy is squeezing her to death and tells her, Hyacinth, I do not think that Penelope can breathe. This is really interesting foreshadowing, because it's not only foreshadowing, obviously, the end of the episode where Penelope says those exact words, I can't breathe, but for this state of breathless anxiety and panic that she spends most of the episode under. I think from the moment she steps out of that carriage, she's never able to properly catch her breath and understand what's happening and process it. But as Hyacinth delightedly explains, it is just, we've known Penelope for all these years, and now she will be my sister.
Oh. I'm also so moved by the moment that Colin and Violet share as Colin turns to embrace his mother. The script says Violet and Colin share a thrilled smile, which really reminds us of what a roller coaster of an evening it has been for Penelope and Colin. It was only a few hours ago that Violet stood with Colin on the staircase, seeing what an awful state he was in, and now he stood in front of her blissfully happy.
I have to say, he looks great in this scene. Whatever bliss he's on, get me some of that. He looks fantastic.
Violet goes on to say that she is delighted for them both and embraces Penelope, who quietly thanks her and returns the hug.
And our listener Sasha had a lot of thoughts about this scene and Violet's experience of the night. She says, Violet's experience of the night is wild. She starts the evening by giving Colin a not so veiled talk about making a move on Pen while he still has a chance. And the next thing she knows, Colin and Pen show up in the drawing room engaged. I love that Colin doesn't even say he's engaged to. I know Pen's in the room, but he's just ta-da! And Sasha continues geez, that was a quick turnaround. But also while those developments were quickly taking place, she also had Fran making a bit of a scene running out of the ball to the Queen's dismay, with Violet chasing after her, only to have it dawn that Fran's in love. That's the moment they're sort of embracing or reacting to when Polin traipses into the drawing room.
It's catching. The love is catching.
It's catching. But it turns out that not every Bridgerton is thrilled by the news, as we catch sight of a bewildered Eloise silently taking in the scene before her. And you know what? She is not the only sibling that's not best pleased by the turn of events. What's going on, Lek?
As Francesca notes, Gregory, who is also dressed for bed, has a sour expression on his face. Greg says he can't believe Colin is engaged before the two of them have even shared a drink together at a tavern, a reminder of how poor Gregory constantly gets left out of the ABC group. Aww. But what's hilarious to me is that in the original script for this episode, Gregory was way more upset. So originally, Gregory stormed off in an angsty rage upon learning Colin would not be able to take him to a tavern before marrying. You can actually see this in the final edit, is when they cut back to the family from Eloise's point of view, Gregory is no longer visible in the room. He has left the room. So the script says, Gregory huffs off in an angsty rage. Colin stifles a chuckle, smirking at Pen as he takes her hand. Aww. Before you get up in arms about this, however, I don't think that Colin actually took Pen's hand, because if you look at the blocking in the scene, Pen is holding Violet's hand at the time, and she doesn't release it until they notice Elle's reaction. Colin is standing visibly apart from Pen. Anyway, then everyone finally notices Eloise, quote, staring daggers at the happy couple in a mix of anger and hurt. So I think this was cut so that we didn't see two shots of characters storming out of the room one after another, which seems over-dramatic even for the Bridgertons.
Can you imagine if Greg had stormed out at the Polin engagement?
Yeah.
I mean, that would mean that 2 out of 5 of the present Bridgertons were unhappy about the engagement.
Yeah.
I mean, those aren't great odds, guys. Obviously, their happy reaction is supposed to contrast against how Portia is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so if they're dropping like flies in protest at the wedding, not as good. But thankfully, in this version of the show, Gregory doesn't storm out of the room. But Eloise, she is on her way out. The room falls silent as Penelope meets Eloise's stunned gaze. I like how Pen drops Violet's hand here. And we see that she hasn't really stepped further into the room past the doorway, as if she isn't really sure whether she can be there, whether she can believe it and really be with the family. It's almost the same blocking that you find in 308 when she's at the Francesca wedding, where you find that Pen is standing a little bit further aside from the rest of the Bridgertons because she doesn't feel like she can be there, or she doesn't know she's going to stay with them.
Removed.
And as a visibly upset Eloise excuses herself, Colin makes to follow, but Pen insists that she be the one to go after her former best friend. Colin relents, but watches after them in concern. And Sasha again was talking about the aftermath of the family's reaction. She says Colin seems so comfortable and settled into this new reality so quickly, whereas Pen is clearly shook, and it's easy to see why, because it happened so fast. They're going to get married. Meanwhile, Colin is just casually and suddenly in his my wife era telling Hyacinth to let Penelope breathe, like this was all inevitably going to become the outcome of their lives rather than this huge and sudden surprise. What do you make of it? I just think he was at such a low point. We described him recently as like a walking corpse, and that's how I think of episode 4 Colin. Yeah. And then to end up with the love of his life and to be with her and to know that he hasn't lost her, it's just such a rise. And I think when we were watching this together and we were like melting at everything he was saying, because everything he says is so perfect and beautiful that you're sort of building up and you're going, oh my God, the fall down from this is going to be horrendous.
Yeah.
For every like incredible moment that there is, you just feel the shadow weighing over it. So Colin takes to it immediately and he embraces it, and Pen still has this hesitancy because she knows what's really hanging over his head. So yeah, brutal. But I'm happy to see him happy for the 5 minutes of episode 5, whatever.
He does jump very quickly into like the Colin, my wife, Bridgerton.
But that's so him though, isn't it?
Yeah.
He does jump into things without really thinking them through. That's just classic Colin.
Yeah. But out in the hallway, Pen catches up with Elle, and Elle rounds on her and angrily exclaims, "My brother, are you quite serious? For how long has this been going on?" She's clearly very hurt and blindsided by this sudden turn of events. As Claudia Jessie told the Bridgerton podcast, Eloise had given Penelope a lot of grace in part 1. She'd kind of let Penelope get on with doing her own thing and hadn't really lost her temper with Penelope at all. But this is a step too far, and so Eloise finally lets her pain and anger flare. Claudia also explained that, though Eloise is upset about Colin and Penelope, she's definitely using it as a reason to lash out against Penelope, and that Elle's primary hurt does still remain with her humiliation over not knowing Penelope was Lady Whistledown.
And in that same interview, Jess Brownell also talked about Eloise's perspective. Interestingly, in the very, very, very first drafts, before it even really made it to the scripts, when they were conceiving episode 1, the writers were wondering about whether they were going to make Eloise quite vindictive towards Penelope and trying to take her down. And they felt that that just wasn't the direction that was right for Eloise, and that wasn't true to her as a character and how she would react. And so they instead made Eloise give Pen all of this grace to kind of be like, you do your thing, I'm hurt, but go on. And then she feels now that Pen has taken that and taken absolute liberties with it. And now all of that hurt that Eloise hasn't really confronted her about for months and months and months finally lashes out here. So it's a little bit of a combination as to why she's reacting.
I feel like what Claudia is talking about here actually is alluded to in some cut dialogue from this scene as well, because after Penelope begs Elle not to tell Colin about her being Lady Whistledown, Eloise originally responded by saying, "That is what you are worried about, not how I might feel about you marrying my brother, but about me keeping your secret." So I feel like she's thinking about how hurt she is by the Lady Whistledown revelation as opposed to maybe how upset she is about this engagement. And it's just kind of fueling that for her.
It's kind of how Colin is pretending to mostly be upset about Marina and Eloise to mask over the fact that he feels really embarrassed by what Lady Whistledown did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you can understand why Eloise is so hurt. This literally came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I always think of that friend scene here. My best friend and my sister.
Yeah.
I made an edit of it years ago, do you remember?
I think so, yeah. You made quite a few friends once, but yeah.
Yeah. I'll try and link it in the show notes. And our listener, Annie M, said, I'm surprised that no one heard what Eloise was saying to Penn in the hallway as they were just arguing outside the door.
Yeah, I did think that.
Oh my God, I was obsessed with this thought.
Mm-hmm.
Elle is very loudly telling all of their secrets.
Yeah. And the Bridgertons are totally eavesdroppers.
Yeah.
I think it's just one of those things where, like, you just have to believe that there's, like, a soundproof wall there or something, because it doesn't really make much sense. But yeah.
They'd all make terrible Whistledowns. I wonder if, like, what happened is, because this is also a very Bridgerton thing, is that they were, like, going to listen in.
And Violet pulled them aside.
No, but, like, Fran did something that annoyed Gregory, or they started, like, squabbling.
They just went back to being Bridgertons.
They just became Bridgertons again. Yeah.
And Hyacinth was like, Fran, maybe you could play a song at their wedding, and then, like, drags her over to the piano to plunk out a tune or something.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it might be a case of the Bridgertons just being chaotic and them being able to get away. But yeah, guys, choose where you're discussing your secrets, please. Elle points out that Colin cannot truly love Penn until she knows who Penn really is.
I mean, I do see Eloise's point, if I'm honest.
I see Eloise's point 100%.
But you think Penn doesn't?
I'm not sure Penn believes it. I think she's a bit like, you didn't know what happened in that carriage, babe.
No, I think that Penelope is very afraid of how Colin may react to her secret.
Mm-hmm.
We see that through this episode.
Do you think she is fearful that she'll lose his love?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also if you think about, like, the household she grew up in where love wasn't really a thing.
And it's conditional.
Yeah, this is something I think she could imagine she might lose very quickly.
And that's why she, like, offers to not marry him, right?
Well, no, she doesn't. This is what I mean. This is what I think always gets me about part 2. I think she should have offered not to marry him.
Yeah. But veg means why she offers the annulment.
Yes, it's what I meant.
Well, Penn pleads with her former friend, giving her word that she will tell Colin. She just needs a little time. Did she tell Colin? Listeners, she did not in the end, but you know, what can you do? Eloise angrily agrees and storms off, leaving Colin to step into the hallway and get the lowdown on the argument that took place about 2 meters away from him.
Colin very sweetly assures Penelope that all will be well.
Oh, his soft voice coming out in full force.
Yeah, we love soft Colin. The delivery of those lines is always just chef's kiss. But the night is ending on a sour note for Penelope as Eloise has brought the weight of Whistledown, which has kind of not been weighing on Penelope too heavily over the past few episodes, crashing down on her with full force. There was also another cut line of dialogue here from Colin. Originally, he told Penn, I will speak with her. All will be well. I am sure of it. We will actually revisit this a little later on in a cutscene.
Mm-hmm. He did try. He gave it a shot.
Yeah.
You see, that's Colin actually trying to tell someone something. Sorry, Penn. I love you so much.
You know what? We actually see that from him a lot this episode because in addition to that cutscene where he's like, I'm going to speak with Elle, and he goes to try to speak with Elle, Antony is like, you should confess your feelings to Penelope. And he's like, okay, I'm going to go confess my feelings to Penelope.
Yeah, you have this man who cannot stop confessing every thought that's passing through his body, which is usually about how much he loves Penn.
Yeah.
With someone who can't bring herself to tell him.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, Penn. I'll stop being harsh on you, babe.
Veg looks really unhappy.
Yeah, fucking, yeah.
You know what? We'll get to it, but I think episode 5 she gets a complete pass from me. Episode 6, I've got words for Miss Featherington.
Also, pass.
Well, we'll get to it.
Anyway, this scene, as you said, there's sort of a shadow over it. And I feel that this whole episode it stops me from fully enjoying it, which I get it's a TV show and it has to be like dramatic and stuff. But this scene is so cute otherwise. And I really wish we could have enjoyed it more. Yeah. And like the slow motion build up beforehand just really gives it an ominous quality that's really hard to fully enjoy. Mm-hmm. And like, I will ask for the rest of part 2, you'll hear this from me a lot. Couldn't we have just had this one thing? Just this one scene.
It is true. Like, she can't enjoy any of it.
No.
One of our Patreon members asked actually 2 of them, I think, similar questions, which we'll say for 306, when we really feel that. But yeah, just even from the beginning with like the doom tree, it's bleak. It's bleak stuff.
Yeah, and we didn't get as much of people reacting to like Polin's frisson and their growing sparks as I wanted in part 1.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that the reactions we do get, which are nice, like we've got Prophet High, she's rounding off Prophet High's arc.
Yeah.
The fact that we've got that, but it's in this context, it's like, grah.
I totally agree with Hi. Our listener Maeve said, Hyacinth made the engagement announcement scene for me. Can we talk about how lovely her reaction was?
So sweet.
And Maeve also said, it's worth mentioning how handsome Colin is with his messy after carriage hair. Fully agree. Hyacinth stole the whole scene for me. Mm-hmm. I absolutely adored her reaction. And it makes me so happy that her and Will are going to get more and more scenes as they go forward, because I think they play their characters so brilliantly. But is everyone going to be as pleased about the engagement as the youngest Bridgerton? We shall see. Penelope tries to nod herself into agreeing with Colin that all will be well, but then we cut back to Penelope writing at her desk with a tear on her cheek.
Regardless of how it happened, it is surely a wonderful time for the happy couple. Well, apparently not. Poor Pen. No, she can never catch her break, not even when she gets bloody engaged to the man she loves.
Well, is that actually why she's upset in this scene, Lecky?
Not quite. Listeners, if you're getting a touch of déjà vu with this scene, then you are not mistaken. Penn isn't upset over Eloise's reaction to the engagement, because this isn't even 305 Penelope at all. Instead, we are doing a little Bridgerton time traveling, because this is actually 302 Penelope contemplating how best to write about her engagement to one Mr. Colin Bridgerton, an engagement which hasn't even happened yet. As we've mentioned before, the scene is reused twice in this season, and interestingly, it may have replaced 2 other scenes this season. The former scene from 302 replaced a scene where Penelope was riding in her carriage on the way home from the full moon ball. There's also a behind-the-scenes photo of this episode's director, Billy Woodruff, posed with Nicola at Penelope's desk while she is still in her enchanted pen costume, which suggests there could have been different footage of Penelope riding at her desk in 305 following the engagement announcement as well, though that is unconfirmed. But fun fact, this scene was also the very last thing to be shot in the reshoots, and so this was the final shot of season 3 as a whole.
It did seem familiar to me, and I did, however, just blindly write a little costume summary, but I was like, I'm sure I recognise.
You were right.
They reuse the same shot in 302 and 305, so you could say like, okay, so which one is the true scene then? Mm-hmm. If you look, she has her Osterley curl in her hair, and if you look really carefully at what she's writing the 302 Whistledown. She isn't writing this at all. So like that tear, nothing to do with this at all.
Nothing to do with the engagement.
For a start, why did they change both scenes? Because like you say, Lecky, we think that they shot original different scenes for both of them. I think we talked about this in our 302 reaction, why they stopped Pen writing in the carriage on the way home and had her writing later on. But what do you think happened with this episode that caused the reshoot? I've seen that picture of Billy Woodruff with enchanted pen, and I definitely think that that's how she was writing it.
I think so too.
Maybe she was too happy when she was writing it.
Like Veg said, God forbid.
Shoot a woman down for being happy at her engagement.
Veg is rolling her eyes, guys.
Yeah, I did from eyes.
They realised that Pen should look more upset after the night was soured by Eloise's reaction. What do we think?
Yeah, I think maybe they wanted to show her being a little more conflicted than happy, potentially.
More drama, more depression, more hurt, more pain.
She smiled, get a reshoot on her. Well, if we look at the script, though, there is a little bit of a hint in there, isn't there, Lek?
Mm-hmm. So the scene description says, later that night, Pen sits at her desk, her impending decision weighing on her like torture as she tries to write. As she finally takes a deep breath and picks up her quill, then Lady Whistledown's voiceover begins.
Okay, so the way it's framed in this episode is Pen is already sort of mid-writing. It's like a flashback, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. This is like the first scene of her at her desk. In the original script, you don't actually see the one of her writing at her desk in the opening. The first one was here.
So it sounds like the original version might have been her deciding whether she was going to write about it at all then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so maybe that's why they couldn't, because that's what happens in 302. She doesn't want to write about it, but she knows she has to. So you find her like in medias res, sort of, she is doing the writing and she's crying about it. So I wonder if that's what happened. Interestingly, there's also some cut Lady Whistledown dialogue where Lady Whistledown originally said,
"It is surely a wonderful time for the happy couple and their families."
As an aside, you can actually see this cut line in the issue of Lady Whistledown that we see being read by a man when the ton are receiving the Lady Whistledown. Mm-hmm. This likely was cut because the line originally would have played just after we saw Lady Featherington's upset reaction, which kind of provided a deliberate contrast between the words. So Pen is having to portray something that she knows isn't true, and that's kind of causing a hurt for her.
Yeah.
But now they've restructured it a little bit, so it's actually delivered over the shot of Penelope writing at her desk. So the message would have been a bit lost because all we'd seen were the happily families, minus Eloise.
I'm guessing if they did reshoot the scene, it was maybe because it wasn't the tone they were going for, as we kind of speculated. In the original script, the episode also picks up immediately with Polin entering the Bridgerton house, and this scene of Penelope at her desk doesn't begin until right after the engagement announcement. The scene description also clarifies that Pen had not yet begun writing her issue at that point, only picking up her quill after wrestling with her emotions, basically struggling to find words. But I imagine they could have just edited that out if they wanted to, open with Lady Whistledown's voiceover and Pen already in the act of writing. So I guess we can just chalk this up to one of Bridgerton's many little mysteries.
Yeah, I like the engagement announcement being framed as a flashback for Pen, because even in her flashback, it's super distorted.
Yeah.
So you can see how it's all still a complete blur to her, and she's still trying to process that. And apologies to our listeners, in case you didn't find that super interesting.
Yeah.
We were there like, what was on the page?
Which Penelope is this? Yeah.
But it does raise the question of who entrapped who in the engagement, because in some ways you could argue that Penelope choosing to write about the engagement in Whistledown seals the deal for them and would have made it very hard for Colin to get out of it once she eventually got around to telling him about Lady Whistledown, because in the Regency, women could break an engagement, but a man couldn't really break an engagement. So is she therefore trapping him by making it public? However, you could argue, did Colin already entrap Penelope by chasing after her carriage and going all Mr. Worldwide on her? Was Lady Whistledown therefore a necessity to avoid that becoming a scandal because people saw it, and had they not ended up engaged, you're in scandal territory? Is that why she's so upset?
So, Colin, I think, is entrapping Pen, and this is not just my Pen bias. It was a quick release of Whistledown for sure. But yeah, ultimately, he caused the ruckus, and I think that was the case, that she was just sort of fixing it before it came out. I think, however, they should have maybe shown some of that turmoil, because some people might not have got that.
Maybe that's how the initial Whistledown scene would have played, where she was wrestling with it.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
And you get a bit more of an insight into her being like, I have to write about this. What do you think, Lek?
In Penelope's defense, basically the entire time saw him not only interrupt the dance, chase her out of the ballroom, chase her out of the ball, chase after her carriage. Who knows if anyone saw him getting into the carriage. But then, of course, the footman also overheard things and saw them stumbling out of the carriage.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I feel like Penelope maybe had to have written something, but I also feel like Penelope selfishly, deep down, she wants this engagement. So, of course, she's going to write about it. And I think, she wrestles with the idea of whether or not to sever the relationship later in part 2 and even, annul their marriage. But I feel like she was forced into writing by Colin's actions.
She was supposed to be engaged to Debling. People are going to know she isn't engaged to Debling.
Yes.
It's best to sort of manage the fallout of that.
Yeah. And like you said, she could break things off. And I feel like if Penelope wasn't so wrapped up in whether or not to tell him about Lady Whistledown, maybe she would think about that more. But I don't think she even has room to really process whether or not to break things off in this episode when the issue is weighing so heavily on her.
And once again, she's got a time pressure. She has to decide in the next few hours. She has to do it.
Yep.
And also, if she didn't tell people, Colin would be ringing the church bell the next morning. He's not going to keep it a secret.
Yeah.
It's going to get out.
He would have told people. That's a good point. Yeah.
It's never going to be kept secret. So from Pen's perspective, it's far better to manage that news.
Yeah.
And also, I think this ties into what she was saying with Eloise, where she was like, I'll tell him in my own time. Pen does have this flaw of she thinks she can micromanage all the situations like she did with Eloise, where she was like, I'll sort it out. And she can make mistakes like that. When we're talking about if Pen entrapped Colin or Colin entrapped Pen, they didn't actually entrap each other.
Yeah.
They actually genuinely love each other. It's just sort of on a technical, obviously they were going to end up together. Both absolved of all charges. Look at that.
Not guilty.
Free to go.
Our listener Annie said, on my 1 millionth rewatch, I really wonder how Pen managed to write her column and get it printed by the morning, as we see her writing in her night attire. Did she throw on a cloak and run out to the printers? Also, why did Colin or any of the Bridgertons not question how quick the news was announced, as there were only a handful of the family in the drawing room when Pen and Colin came in? Yeah, I think it is weird that she was in her night clothes and then had to get dressed again. She is used to making late night visits, though.
I think they originally filmed this scene of her in her enchanted pen getup. So I feel like if we had kept that scene in, we would have just thought, oh, she just must have ran to the printers after this, you know?
Yeah, she's used to late night dashes, isn't she, at the end of the day? Yeah, I think Colin and the Bridgertons wouldn't question it too much because once again, Colin is shouting around everywhere. And it's kind of expected that Lady Whistledown just has the insight. And so they'd be like, probably the servants.
Yeah. And even Eloise did see him chase her out of the ballroom, basically.
Yeah, that's the thing everyone saw. So it's not crazy to think that someone saw him and heard from whoever.
Yeah.
And it's like, Portia's not going to stay quiet, is she? If Pen got home and the Bridgertons thought, oh, Pen told Portia when she got home, then obviously it's going to be everywhere.
Yeah, like we'll learn later, Portia knows that Penelope was out late with Colin Bridgerton.
But for now, we have a far more pressing matter to deal with as we cut to the credits and spy that for the very first time, something is up with the Bridgerton tree. Our listener Ashley asked us, what the hell was that storm brewing hanging over our beloved tree in the intro? That was the moment my heart sank for the second half. No Polin against the world, more War of the Roses style Polin that I was not prepared for.
Oh.
As someone from Yorkshire, I really appreciate that reference. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I wish they'd done this for the whole season. Why did they only do it for part 2?
No.
Why was episode 3 not like a really windy tree?
Yeah.
Episode 2 could have been the tree at night with the full moon.
Delightful.
Yeah.
Episode 1, they could have had a pirate mast just floating in the distance.
You know what I would have liked in the episodes where we don't see it in part 2? Just like a little shot of a balloon in the distance getting further and like further away.
I remember physically having a reaction to the doom tree because it was like a jump scare. I was like, what the fuck has just happened?
God.
Yeah, we knew we were doomed, essentially. I think it really shows a real tonal shift as well between the two parts. Part 1 was really full of whimsy, whereas part 2 is far more drama driven. Part 1 is sort of the rom-com with a lot of emphasis on the comedy, whereas part 2 is far more the romantic drama and the repercussions for the actions that we saw in part 1. So what will the tree do next year? I'm now terrified.
Chop it down.
Will the tree have a mask on its face? Oh my God, imagine when John dies. What would it do?
Actually, historically, isn't Ben's season set during the year without a summer or something?
Oh, technically in history.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the year without summer.
Yeah, so I wonder if it'll be just
Dead.
gloomy. Yeah, gloomy skies.
Oh, what we really wanted is like the Jane Eyre reference. I don't know which episode this would have been, but a lightning bolt striking the tree and splitting the tree in half.
Aw.
Two worlds. They're from two worlds. It would work. Yeah.
Love is a thunderbolt, Colin.
Aw.
There you go. Yeah, so now we're terrified of the tree. It doesn't do anything in episode 6. I don't find episode 6 not stressful. Why is that hanging around like a happy tree?
Yeah.
I'm there having heart palpitations at every turn.
Yeah.
Well, okay, if you can believe it, we're about 5 minutes into this episode, but it's finally morning and time to see how the rest of the ton are handling the news. After all, it seems Pen did manage to write the rest of her issue, get dressed into a Whistledown outfit, nip to the printers, and get home and get to bed. Honestly, what a day. She's knackered.
It's only going to get more busy.
I know, babe, but how are the rest of the ton doing?
Well, Greenwich fans, we get a few shots of our beloved Old Royal Naval College as members of the ton read the news in Whistledown. We then head over to Lady Tilly's house where she is tangled up with Benedict in bed. They're having a great old time.
You can just kind of assume that if you're like, at any point, where's Benedict? He's probably tangled up with Lady Tilly.
Yeah. So she reaches over to grab the Lady Whistledown.
Could have been anything. She could have been grabbing anything.
To which Benedict remarks, "Is that Lady Whistledown? I think you'd find her rather common." Back off, Ben.
Who the fuck are you calling common, Ben?
Yeah.
Veg is very unimpressed.
Yeah. Back off.
Our Patreon member Claire said, I always ask this question to myself during my many rewatches. When did the Lady Whistledown paper arrive at Lady Tilly's? Did someone sneak into the bedroom whilst Tilly and Benedict were distracted? Did they army crawl in so as not to be seen or just walk in? What does everyone else think? It bugs me every rewatch. And Purple Cat Doctor said, I keep imagining a footman in camouflage gear, commando crawling in to deliver Lady Whistledown and desperately trying not to see and hear what's going on a few feet away in bed.
What does like a Regency camouflage look like? It's just like damask patterns or something.
Yeah. My theory is that when she was at the fair, this is Lady Tilly, and she's in the tent where they're teaching about the balloon, full of lots of inventors. She doesn't, one man is not enough for her, as we've established. So she got with a couple of the inventors too. She got with the guy who offered a lamp to Portia. She got with them, she had her wicked way with them, and they came around our house, one of the inventors, and they installed a Wallace and Gromit style system of pipes and pulleys.
One of like the little balloons that they were selling at the fair.
Yeah. So that's how it arrived.
I love it.
I like this better than my theory that the servants are just used to it and they just came in and delivered the Lady Whistledown.
God.
No, we've got a high-tech heist situation.
Like pneumatic tubes, like the ones with the air sucks it in, like spits it out.
I am obsessed.
Lady Tilly bounces back that it is anything but common to be a lady who speaks her mind.
Slay.
And points out that Benedict might be interested in this issue. As Benedict reads of Colin's engagement, his mouth drops open. He clearly was not expecting it either. This isn't super interesting, but there was also a cut line from Tilly here that I find very funny upon rewatching, because you can see they cut away just as she's forming her lips to speak again, only to cut to her smiling instead a second later. But anyway, Tilly originally said to Benedict, "It is anything but common to be a lady who speaks her mind," and then she added, "The few of us who do must support one another."
And let's hope a lady didn't cut that line out, because that would be horrible irony.
Oh my God, yeah. Speaks her mind. Snip.
I think maybe they cut this because I don't think even Penelope and Tilly have any scenes.
No.
Yeah, so.
No, let's just imagine that she loved it.
Yeah.
We will pop in and see the Featheringtons soon, but first let's go break our fast at Lady Danbury's house. Book fans, I'm sure you'll all be happy to know that Lady Danbury had no real involvement in Polin's love story at all, actually, but is rather pleased by it. How great.
Wonderful.
So sad Lady Danbury wasn't involved, but that's a discussion for another day.
Lady Danbury's response to the Lady Whistledown issue also played out a bit differently initially. Lady Danbury currently responds by saying, "Oh, good grief," but originally she said, "Oh my, it seems Miss Featherington is not the only young lady she has written about this week. I shall have to see about the Queen's state."
About Fran.
I think if they wanted to tease the idea, as we see later in part 2, that Lady Danbury knew of Pen's identity all along, her concerned reaction makes more sense than the almost vague interest conveyed in her original line of dialogue, where she kind of keeps her cards closer to her chest.
Well, interestingly, in the interview with the Bridgerton podcast for this episode that Jess Brownell did, Jess actually talked about Lady Danbury's reaction, specifically in that scene with the Queen, and gave us a bit of a timeline for Lady Danbury's discovery of Lady Whistledown. Jess thinks that Lady Danbury hadn't quite figured out the identity of the author at this point, but that Lady Danbury strongly suspected that it was a young debutante who was trying to find her voice. So the pool was narrowing for her, but she hadn't quite pinned it on Pen yet. And she actually has a lot of sympathy for the writer, because she remembered what it was like to be a young debutante and to not be able to use her voice. So when she's talking to the Queen, kind of from this point onwards, Lady Danbury is trying to cool the Queen's reaction a little bit. So Lady Danbury doesn't know it's Pen yet, but inching ever closer. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this episode she has a really good idea.
This cut dialogue also originally had an impact on Marcus, with the script saying, "We're off Anderson taking the column again, getting an idea to check on someone himself."
Ooh.
We will revisit that later.
Polin fans, if you are upset over the whole Lady Danbury Polin situation, let me console you by reminding you all of a very happy Polin memory that took place in this very room at Danbury House.
Stop it.
Can any of you remember what it was?
It's the 202 scene. You do not count.
Yeah, it's like the same room, which also blows my mind because I don't know how everyone fit in that room.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so they're always there in spirit. Once again, Colin Bridgerton guilty. No, not guilty.
Not guilty. Yeah, we actually found him not guilty. But anyway.
Oh dear. Lady Danbury is worried about the Queen's state. How is dear Charlotte coping?
Over at the palace, the Queen is still reeling from the events of the night before, exclaiming, "I let my guard down for 1 week and then my sparkler refuses the lemonade from my Marquis. What a disaster." She's immediately worried about what Lady Whistledown is going to say about it all, saying, "I can only imagine the analogies Whistledown will see fit to make. She will compare me to a sour fruit." I think it's very funny how the Queen unknowingly draws parallels between herself and Penelope here, who of course describes herself in a similar fashion in the book, as well as during some cut Lady Whistledown dialogue from 101.
So a bit of a throwback there. What happened in 101 that didn't make the edit?
So in some Lady Whistledown voiceover,
"And shall one Lady Featherington finally resist bedecking her misses in the most unflattering of colours? Or will she have them appear as only the most undesirable pieces of overripe citrus fruit once again?"
And the script says, and they do look very much like some rather sour produce, don't they? Aww.
Especially Penelope in her yellow dress is what it says.
Watching Colin Bridgerton dance with some pretty young thing.
Yeah.
I love that Penelope. We love her, sour fruit and all. But to the Queen's surprise, Lady Whistledown barely remarked on the lemonade scandal of the night before, simply remarking that Fran's eyes were now on John Sterling, declaring them to be a fine match. Clearly, that's Pen not wanting to throw her almost sister-in-law under the carriage on that one. But, you know, no good deed goes unpunished, does it? You protect you Bridgertons, you get chased by the Queen. So do I find this believable that column was enough to tip off Queen Charlotte that something was amiss with Lady Whistledown?
Not really.
And spark this whole hunt for her that sort of takes over part 2?
No, I don't. I've always felt this was a little bit forced. I thought this might be more believable if we saw like the Queen reacting to Lady Whistledown's weakness and the lack of insults aimed her way, maybe across multiple issues. But yeah, it feels a bit forced to me.
I know. I wish we'd done more with Queen Charlotte in season 3, especially part 2, because I think we could have done a lot more to antagonize the Queen and to really then raise the stakes as well for Penelope on being like, I actually can't reveal that I'm Whistledown right now because she's going to come for me or something.
Actually, there's some more cut dialogue that kind of alludes to maybe how she ferreted out Lady Whistledown's identity. It says that she maybe laid a trap for Lady Whistledown because there was another line of dialogue in 304 where Lady Danbury remarked that it seemed like the Queen and Lady Whistledown were finally starting to see eye to eye. And Queen Charlotte responded by saying that she deliberately said that because she wanted Lady Whistledown to hear that and like let her guard down and that she was going to like spring a trap all along, which I also still feel was kind of forced. So
as we'll see in this episode, the Queen gets really bored when Whistledown doesn't play ball and like doesn't have like a spiky relationship with her. So anytime that happens and she goes quiet, she wants to draw her out and set her a trap. But for now, it's time to head back to Featherington House and see how they are all taking the news. Will they be as thrilled as Hyacinth or as pissed off as Elle? Let's find out. We find Prudence and the Finches gathered in the drawing room with Portia. Dankworth is gleefully reading aloud the Lady Whistledown in his hand, much to Portia's annoyance. Must you read aloud, Mr. Dankworth, she wearily says. But listen up, Portia, you might want to hear what the scribe has to say on this one. And as Mr. Finch takes over reading the rest, Whistledown shares...
Should I do it in a Whistledown or a Finch voice?
A Whistledown, but I'm intrigued.
let's do the Finch, actually.
It may come as a surprise to all that Mr. Bridgerton's rumoured assistance in helping Miss Featherington find a husband has instead led to the two of them finding each other.
That's actually cute. But there were echoes of Mr. Beaver in there.
Yeah.
Finch is delighted. The sisters spit out their drinks. Portia does not look best pleased and snatches a scandal sheet from his hands. And who has been listening in? The authoress herself, who smirks at the stunned silence from her family. How is she looking, Veg?
Well, Pen is peeking around the corner in a seafoam green dress, classic, tulle sleeves, also classic, and a sweet little damask fabric, which is really cute. We actually expected something a little different for this scene, or for the mirror, which is what it goes on to do. As the mirror scene preview video that was released with the caption "Mirror, Mirror" was Pen's dress that had the pink detailing that faded to fully pink at the bottom of the skirt.
The willow dress.
Yeah, exactly, the willow dress. And that pinkish one, it turns out, was the one that was used mainly on the day that they did like all the promo, so like all the sort of character shots and things like that. That's the dress they used. But this dress here is gorgeous too. We're going to see a lot more of it this episode. It's like Pen's main dress.
Yeah.
And it does a really good job. It's really beautiful, but really intricate and quite grown up, I think. And I will discuss the amazing hair and makeup in a later imported scene where we get to see it a little bit closer.
I love this dress. I feel like she looks like an angel. The layered colors, like John Glazer says. So you can't really quite tell what color it is.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think she looks like an angel in this outfit. It's just beautiful.
It's one of my favourites. I love the way, because it has all those flowers creeping over her. And I love the way it sort of reaches over the hem of her and the neckline of her and creeps across her.
Yeah.
So beautiful. It's one of my absolute favourites. I can't decide if this is my favourite pen, but she's up there for me. That's almost everyone who's in the know now. Are we missing anyone? Perhaps a Viscount and his Viscountess?
Fear not, Cantony are definitely on their way, and we will be reuniting with them both in just a moment. But first, I just want to draw your attention to a little cutscene that may be of interest to Polin and Eloise fans. In some cut dialogue we mentioned earlier, Colin had initially told Pen he would speak with Eloise, and he actually attempted to do so here. So here is how it went. The scene description says, "We find a concerned Colin outside Eloise's door. He's knocking, but there's no answer. Violet is also present, and she sees Colin calling out to Eloise, asking if she is in her room. After a moment, she approaches Colin and says, 'You must give her time, she will come around.' After Colin and Violet share their hope that Elle will come around and that her friendship with Penelope will soon be restored, Violet adorably adds, 'I have missed Penelope, I am so pleased with your choice.' She then basically leads Colin away, asking him to come celebrate with the rest of the family. And for those wondering if Eloise was present, I think she may have already been at Cressida's house because the scene of her complaining to Cressida about the situation initially followed this scene.
So he was just knocking on an empty empty door.
Empty door. Yeah.
He's like, she hates me. She hates everything. It's like, babe, she's just not there.
Yeah.
I think this would have been sweet because the Violet moment.
Yeah, I'm so pleased with your choice. So cute.
But I wonder if it's sort of unnecessary because Eloise is never icing Colin out of the discussion. She always goes to him, actually. It's more Pen that she's upset with, so I don't know. Girls got stuff to do. They can't be hanging around home all day. Okay, Lecky, you promised me a Viscount and Viscountess. I've been searching for the both high and low. I cannot find them anywhere. After all, they would absolutely be riding home in Anthony's carriage, right? Black, big wheels, probably rocking back and forth if he's in there with Kate. Have you seen it anywhere, babe?
I have not seen Anthony's carriage anywhere, but I have spotted Colin's carriage riding past the Old Royal Naval College. It's the wrong carriage entirely, but we might as well take a look inside and see what we can find.
Well, what do you know? It's Kate and Anthony in there, after all, returning home from their second honeymoon. How kind of Colin to lend them his carriage for their ride home. Maybe that's why he had to hitch a ride home with Pen last night.
Yeah.
Because it's been commandeered by his older brother. I mean, it is Anthony paying the bills, though. So, fair's fair. It's technically Anthony's carriage.
Listeners, this carriage mix-up is, of course, a continuity error, as we'll soon see Antony's black carriage pulling up outside the Bridgerton house. But inside the carriage, a loved-up Cantony reveal they have some very exciting news to share with the family as well. Antony is thinking impure thoughts about the future mother of his child. That's right, Kate's pregnant.
Yay! I love Anthony so much in this scene. Romantic Anthony. And we see him later when he's speaking to Colin. Just how excited he gets and just how excited he is to get home and talk to the family and tell them what is probably the most exciting news that they've heard since maybe last night.
The last exciting news?
Yeah.
Things move fast, you know. Fran's getting engaged next day.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think the Cantony fans, well, I'm a Cantony fan as well, but the hardcore Cantoniers must love this scene. It's so lovely. And he's
perfect.
talking about being so eager that he can shout for all of Mayfair to hear. I love his development.
Yeah, he just wants to tell everyone. It's a bit like Colin in that way. All the Bridgertons, like when they're in love, they just want to tell everybody, like when something good happens to them or their loved ones.
I can't wait for Eloise to be so angry when she's in love with Philip. She's like, you will never guess what happened to me yesterday.
Yeah.
If you notice that Kate looks a bit worried in the scene, that's because she does have some concerns regarding the pregnancy that we will get into later. But there was some cut dialogue here that alluded to her hesitance, with Kate telling Antony that she wanted to, quote, settle in before sharing the news, adding that the family have much news of their own. The last line, I think, was cut because it almost seemed like she was anticipating the engagement announcement, which is kind of weird.
Prophet Kate.
Yeah, prophet highs rubbing off. The scene description then says that we would have seen the faintest flicker of nerves on Kate's face as they pulled up to the Bridgerton house, where
they are warmly greeted by the rest of the Bridgertons. Well, most of them. A handful. Antony hilariously states that he could get used to returning from such long journeys if he's greeted in this manner, perhaps inspiring him to take an even longer trip later in part 2.
Yeah, the Bridgertons are to blame for sure.
Yeah, exactly. The Bridgertons responsible for the baby moon in India, after all. Yeah. I also have to give a shout out to the sweet moment between Antony and Hyacinth as he scoops her up into his arms. They have such a beautiful bond. And I also have to say, Antony's blue travelling coat, gorgeous. Yeah. And his suit, have you seen the fabric of the suit he's wearing?
Yeah,
it has the most insane, intricate texture. It's so cool.
Yeah. They know how to make a good coat, this show.
They know a good coat.
Yeah. They do. I have a question here. Why does Gregory have his bloody arm sling on still? What's the point of this arm sling? We don't know. Will Tilston, the actor who plays Gregory, we asked him. He had no clue. If we ever get to interview a writer, please can we ask what was in the letters?
How long did it take for Greg's arm to?
Yeah, or just what happened? Like, why are we... What was the point?
Yeah, like, what's the narrative significance of him having to constantly wear this sling?
I don't know.
God.
I think it is quite funny, though, because it does reinforce that it's literally been days since the balloon sequence. Like, it shows you how fast everything has gone. But yeah, it feels like for us that Gregory's been in this sling for weeks.
Weeks.
But then Benedict walks in wearing the same clothes as the night before, which he jokingly tells Antony is from his morning stroll.
Antony immediately clocks this, by the way.
He's clocking everything. He's back and he's like, what have these little shits been doing? He's like, I assume they're all up to something.
And I think they've memed Antony, like, coming in and, like, it's all the Bridgertons doing random shit. It's definitely that scene with, like, the pizza box. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Benedict then makes an immediate beeline.
Oh.
Rest in peace, Edmund Fly High with Archie and the Angels. To Colin, sharing that he'd heard a curious piece of news in Whistledown this morning. Oh my God, the bloody law on this line. Lecky, take it away.
Okay, so in the lead up to season 3 being released, actually it was months and months prior.
And the years before season 3 was released.
They released some merch, including some like stationery sets with stickers and stuff that said, this author finds herself compelled to share the most curious of news.
And we spent the longest time, bearing in mind we didn't actually know if this was going to be in the show, and I'm not even sure if this is from that or if it's just a coincidence.
So we thought for sure that was going to be like in a Whistledown issue, but weirdly enough, the closest line of dialogue we have was Benedict speaking it.
We're still thrilled that it was there.
Moving on, Kate, hearing the news, seems to sense that it isn't the right moment to share her own news about her pregnancy, and we actually see more of her own hesitation here as she redirects Antony's hand off of her belly.
Oh, she's like, oh, this reason I don't have to share it right now. Oh, fine, absolutely. I do feel bad for her because it is overwhelming and there are so many of them and they all make so much noise that if you tell them a piece of news and if you're not fully ready to share it with everyone, they're just gonna...
I mean, there's that, but I also feel like Kate senses it's not the right moment because she doesn't want to overshadow Colin's news.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think she's being sweet in addition to kind of being relieved that she doesn't have to face what she isn't ready to face yet.
Oh, yep, the Viscountess wants in on the gossip and Hyacinth, practically bursting with excitement, tells Antony that Colin's engaged to Penelope Featherington. How many Penelopes do they know? But Kate and Antony both have brilliant reactions, with Kate going wide-eyed before her mouth drops open and she whips her head over to Colin in astonishment. Ben has his arm thrown around a beaming Colin while Antony glares at his younger brother.
Yeah. Interestingly, I always thought that Antony was a bit put out that he couldn't make his own announcement here about the pregnancy. And while it's possible that Johnny played it that way, the scene description says that Antony is basically in a state of disbelief after hearing the news.
I think Antony's immediate reaction here, where he does revert into his sort of immediate annoyance.
Fatherly.
Yeah, I think this is his default setting. He has like a default annoyed at my siblings because I've done something stupid impulse.
Yeah.
And like 9 out of 10 times, he'll probably be right that whatever they're about to say has been something stupid. But I think it is funny how Kate moderates and guides Antony's reaction.
Yeah.
Because she knows exactly how to handle him. And I think a past Antony would have reacted so differently. I mean, we've seen him not take news well beforehand, but this softer version of him, he does have that initial impulse. And then Kate is able to sort of temper him back, being like, we're happy about this news.
Yes, yeah. And he's like, all right, okay.
And he unconvincingly agrees that it is wonderful news, and Colin thanks him, saying he's in high spirits. What does Kate mouth to Fran at this point? We'll have to have a look and insert it. But she turns to Fran and like she says something. I couldn't figure out what it was.
Editor's note, I think she just mouths engaged.
Antony wants to catch up with his brothers pronto, and so grabs B and C and leads them away, much to Gregory's disappointment. He is one of the brothers too, you know? Or perhaps more accurately, the family pet. One day, Greg, when the rest of us are old and grey, in 2067, and you're finally the lead of your own season.
If they had left the scene of him storming out the previous night, this would have been a funny place to include another scene of him doing that, turning it into like a running gag this episode.
He just storms out.
Yeah.
You know what the AO3 writers would say about that? They'd be like, he's upset about Colin marrying Penn because he has a crush on Penn.
Yeah.
I mean, not wrong. And one of our listeners, Coco, wanted some justice for Greg, saying that Hyacinth's casual comment hurts my heart a little bit. Truly a mini Colin wanting to matter and being swatted away.
Oh, yeah.
They are very similar to one another, aren't they? They have the same age gap as Antony and Colin.
Crazy.
And so I bet Colin always had that, where he was wanting to join his brothers and being pushed out. It's good character building.
Especially how different young Antony and Benedict looked compared to young Colin.
Yeah.
Yeah. The men in their 20s and the 6-year-old child.
A little 7-year-old trotting after him.
Yeah.
I want to drink at the tavern with you. Oh, I'd also love to know what Ben is saying to Antony and Colin as they head off, but alas, we'll never know. But you know who is lingering through this scene? She keeps walking through. Celia, the maid.
Oh, that'll be highlighted in season 4?
Yeah. She keeps cutting in through the scene. I was like,
love that.
I was like, I know you.
Interesting.
I love that. Benefit is on the horizon, dear friends. But there was one sibling missing from this happy little family reunion. Anyone know where Els got to?
In the Cowper drawing room, Eloise rants about how Penelope used their friendship to gain access to Colin to a very distracted and weary-looking Cressida, who reveals her parents plan to marry her off to Lord Greer, a man old enough to be her great-grandfather.
Oh, I do feel a bit bad for Eloise here because she has really been blindsided and is once again left feeling like she didn't know a part of Penelope. But I do find it quite funny to imagine like a 7-year-old Pen scheming her way into a friendship just to like hang out and play dolls with Colin or something. It's like, how much planning did you think went into this?
Another room for another Taylor lyric there. I'm a mastermind.
Look at you getting all the Taylor Swift lyrics.
Listen, I actually really like Midnights.
Yay.
But anyway.
Knew that I'm a mastermind, and now you're mine.
Yeah.
I think that Elle does know deep down that that's not true, and that she and Pen did have a real friendship.
Yeah, of course.
It's just reopened this wound of pain for her, and it's understandable that she's lashing out. Although, unfortunately, it does occupy her mind a little too much during this episode.
Yeah.
When she really should be paying a bit more attention to Cressida than she ends up doing. Like, poor Cress, she's genuinely going through some shit. And Elle's like, on another point, no.
I will say, in Eloise's defense, this is one of those scenes where she actually notices, and when Cressida admits that she's going to be married off to Lord Greer, she, like, pauses. She apologizes. She sits down with Cressida and actually listens to her, and that's rare for Eloise. So this is a moment where she actually is present and is being a good friend.
Aww.
But anyway, there is also some cut dialogue in this scene where, after Eloise apologizes for ranting, saying she wouldn't have gone on if she'd known Cressida's plight, Cressida originally replied by saying, "No, it is all right. I will find a way to get out of it somehow, and at the very least we shall still have each other." I think they cut this to give more weight to the dinner scene with Lord Greer later on, where she realizes how horrible it would be to marry him, making that the moment where she decides she needs to find a way out of her predicament. But the little comment here about how Cressida envisioned at least having Eloise as a friend in her future is very sad.
Yeah, that is awful.
Cressida goes on to bravely declare that they, meaning Elle and Cressida, will be able to use Lord Greer's money to shop and queen over society, throw splendid balls, and flirt shamelessly with widowers. Widowers, did you say? This seems like blatant Philoise foreshadowing, though the scene description and Claudia's acting in the scene indicates, quote, "This is not the kind of life that Elle has pictured for herself." So while her love story may take her by surprise, it seems like the writers are maybe hinting here that Elle will still remain true to herself within her marriage, is what I'm thinking. And also Jess's acting in the scene is phenomenal, by the way.
Yeah, I agree. I feel so bad for Cressida because she is kind of trying to make the best of a bad situation, because at this point I don't think she realizes how grim life with Greer would be.
At this point, she's resigned, yeah.
And so she's like, well, this is kind of the fate of a lot of us. I'll try and make the best out of it. But yeah, that's going to go downhill. But Cressida, I'm sure we'll figure it out at some point in the episode. But for now, I am dying to know how Anthony is handling all of this. So let's get back to the Bridgerton study to check in on ABC. He sat his brothers down at the table, telling them about what a great time he had in Devon. I mean, they must have been gone for like a week. It's not been that long, has it?
Yeah.
But apparently there are bigger fish to fry. Colin shares luck with Ben, knowing what's coming, as Anthony sits down and says, Explain.
Yeah.
I think it's sweet because I bet the brothers have been so used to like growing up and constantly being dragged into Anthony's office to like be really genuinely told off. But what you actually get is Anthony almost like making fun of his past self. Like, I think he knows that he has that reputation. And so he's kind of jokingly being like, explain.
I think he is concerned though as well. The Marina thing was 2 years ago, not that long ago.
Yeah,
not long ago at all.
Yeah, if you compare this to Anthony's reaction to Colin's engagement to Marina all the way back in season 1, then this is kind of worlds away from that reaction. Both engagements have come as a surprise to Anthony, but in season 1 he was furious with Colin and treated him almost like a child. Whereas here, now the shock has worn off a little, Anthony is much more playful and relaxed, and ultimately we can see that he is genuinely happy for Colin.
Yeah. Our listener, Late, talked about the scene, saying, I think this scene reveals a lot more than we realise. The scene begins with Anthony getting drinks, which to me implies he's thinking of the announcement as celebratory.
Such a good point.
And he's just going through the motions of being a tough older brother. Is that how you read it? And as he's getting the drinks, Benedict and Colin communicate with each other using a number of adorable sibling facial gestures. I agree. I like the idea that he's going through the motions and being like, I have to do this as like the big older brother, so explain.
Yeah.
But not really meaning it.
And I also really love that the idea of him fetching the drinks like right off hints that this was supposed to be celebratory.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that point.
Or Anthony. And I think Anthony's reaction, they could have played it so many different ways, but I think his reaction here, being kind of invested in it and happy with it, really shows how much of an impact Kate has had on him. You know, he has now had experience of marrying for love, and he knows what that is like and what joy that can bring, what pain that can bring if you can't do it.
How you can be swept away by that.
Yeah, exactly. We all know what happened in that gazebo. And before season 3, we spent a lot of time wondering if Anthony would have put up a bit more of a fight against Colin getting engaged again, especially so young, and if Colin would have to stand up to his brother and really defend Penn in a way that he hadn't defended Marina. I think ultimately we didn't have Anthony in season 3 long enough for there to have been a storyline like that. It just wouldn't have worked. But I love the Anthony that we do get because he sees it and he gets it, and he's like, I want my siblings to have what I have. Why would he withhold that from his family? But I think the question is, how does Anthony know that this is real? Because he was so against the Marina situation and he is fully on board with this. And like you said, there's only been 2 years in between that. How does he know that this is it for Colin?
Because he's experienced love himself. I feel like he can identify that this is the real thing.
He's never seen them together.
By seeing Colin's reaction.
He's been in fucking Devon.
He's seen them dance a couple of times at a ball.
Like you said, I really wish that we had had more time with Anthony this season to explore that almost kind of like father-son dynamic that they kind of have at times, because I feel like that may have made this scene slightly more impactful, in my opinion. I think that we are supposed to just grasp from the scene that he knows love, and so he can see that in Colin. And also, Colin defends himself very well within the scene, in the dialogue. So
yeah, he's like, back off. I know. I'm old enough to make this decision. And yeah, I like the idea that Anthony recognises that love within his brother. And he's like, I get that this is the real thing. Whereas he probably could tell that season 1, Colin was doing it to make a point. A slightly evasive Colin tells his brothers, no furtive luck's necessary, which prompts Anthony to dig for details, pointing out how sudden it all is. But Colin counters that it was his last proposal that was actually sudden. This with Penn has been, in the words of Taylor Swift, a long time coming.
Colin acknowledges that he can't blame his brothers if they are prone to think him foolish. This kind of connects with 108 and how Colin felt in the aftermath of his short-lived engagement with Marina like a fool, but his foolishness this time was not realizing it sooner.
This is another point where me and Veg were physically grasping at one another in the cinema and being like, I can't believe this is real.
It was bizarre. We couldn't believe he was saying it.
Yeah.
It was like a hallucination, honestly. It's just so perfect because unlike But Colin, his show counterpart is just so certain about how he feels, and he knows it's love and he knows it's right. In fact, my Polin heart just needs to relive the whole of this declaration as he says, my feelings for Penelope are not a thunderbolt from the sky. I have known her for a very long time, and perhaps I have always felt something for her. My only foolishness this time was not realising it sooner.
I have always felt something for her.
Fucking Lord.
Every Polin fan across the world cheered when they heard that line, I'm assuming.
Dearest listeners, only took us 3 seasons to get here, but he has finally acknowledged that he's been there the whole time.
Yeah.
If you were newer to the fandom, then I think we just need to reinforce what a victory this felt like, because Polin fans had fought a battle for years, mostly amongst their own internal selves, not against anyone, just to insist that Colin did already have feelings for Penelope. Yeah, we sat and analysed every single moment in season 1 and season 2 to find these bits of evidence that he was already falling in love with her, that he had been for ages.
Yeah.
And we really, really hoped that Colin's journey in season 3 wasn't going to be about falling in love with Penelope, but about him realising that he was already in love with her.
Yeah.
So the validation to know that we didn't waste so many years.
However many episodes of this podcast,
Thank the Lord, is all I can say.
Book fans, you will also be rejoicing at Colin's speech because of the mention of his feelings not being a thunderbolt from the sky. This is pretty much straight out of the book. It actually comes up a few times as Colin grapples with how exactly he feels for Penelope. During the You Are My Mess scene in the book, Colin thinks to himself, he'd always thought love would hit a man like a thunderbolt, that one day you'd be loitering about at some party, bored to tears, and then you'd see a woman and you'd know instantly that your life would be changed forever. But this scene with Penelope, it had crept up on him. The change had been slow, almost lethargic, and if it was love, well... ... Daphne also mentions thunderbolts when he turns to her for advice, telling him love grows and changes every day, and it isn't like some thunderbolt from the sky instantly transforming you into a different man. And finally, it's mentioned when Colin realizes he is in fact in love with Penelope. Forget what I said, he says. And that was when he realized that Daphne had been right. His love hadn't been a thunderbolt from the sky. It had started with a smile, a word, a teasing glance. Every second he had spent in her presence, it had grown until he'd reached this moment, and he suddenly knew he loved her.
That was beautifully read, Lecky.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, that was so good. If you're wondering how Daphne knew about the Thunderbolt thing, it's because it came from Benedict. So Book Colin learnt his version of love, that it was this sudden thing, from Benedict going on and on and on and on.
From the Cinderella type love at first sight.
Yeah.
I loved that we got that line from the book.
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. And it's another one of those moments where, because the book is such an internalized story for Colin, it's all happening in his head. It's another clever way that the writers managed to vocalize those feelings that he had. And you know what we didn't have to have? We didn't have to have a scene of Colin
on top of her?
On top of Pen. That always bugs me in the book. I'm like, if you don't know, get off of her.
Yeah.
Because it'll come up later in the mirror scene where people are like, Book Colin said, I'm not going to take her virginity on a sofa. And then show Colin does. It's like, yeah, but babe, at least he fucking knew how he felt about her.
At least he knew what he felt. Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get to that later. Oh, gosh. I'm just thankful that Colin knew he loved her rather than making us all go through the ordeal.
Delightful.
We've suffered enough in the show as it is and as it will be. But Benedict is having the time of his life listening to his brother, while Anthony is absolutely amazed to hear this all from Colin. It's like what you say, Lecky. Because he's hearing it, he believes it more and more and more. And he goes, have you said these words to her?
Oh, I love his delivery of that too.
It's so brilliant.
So cute.
Colin smirkingly admits that the actual betrothal part of the story happened rather swiftly, which snaps Anthony right back into his default pissed off at my sibling shtick.
Yeah.
But before he can get too riled, Ben happily points out that he can't exactly duel his own brother. After all, that's something Anthony reserves only for the very best of friends, right?
And also they're engaged. Yeah.
Also engaged.
They're
Yeah,
engaged.
so
That's the main thing.
We're good. Can you technically be engaged if someone doesn't say yes? I can be like, Veg, will you marry me? Okay, I assume you said yes. So, oh, bless him. Unfortunately, Anthony decides that Colin is marrying Pen for the right reasons, so he won't be shooting at his little brother today. But he insists that Colin should go tell her. ASAP, actually. Colin's like, no props, big bro. Leave it with me. I'll have it knocked up before the day's out. Job done. Tick that off my to-do list. It's probably not quite what Anthony had in mind, but Colin did technically confess his love again to Pen, so you can't say he shirked his duty on that one.
Great. And I just want to say again, what an honour it is to see Anthony be so romantic here, telling Colin to express his love, advising his brother. He's showing brotherly love. He's showing romantic love. He's showing empathy for Penelope and how she should be feeling.
He knows who Penelope is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's so sweet with Anthony because it's like a lot of it you can be like, oh, it's Anthony being a simp for Kate. But then I think it is also this beautiful story of someone who'd lived with his trauma, his unprocessed trauma for so long.
Yeah.
And then finally being free of that burden and how playful it makes him.
Yeah, he's not just tamed, but he's like freed by his love for Kate.
Yeah, because didn't Violet talk about him in season 2? I can't remember the exact phrasing she used, but she was like, when you were younger, you were so carefree. And she talked about this version of Anthony that existed before his dad's death and that he completely shut down and hardened as a result of it. So
yeah,
Anthony, very, very cute. And if we're only going to get him for tiny little moments, then you want the moments to count, right?
Yeah.
Colin decides to head off immediately to see Pen as Benedict raises his glass to both their wives. Mentioning the word wife around Colin naturally activates his innate Colin Bridgerton, my wife Bridgerton tag on AO3. So
we used to say hero Colin is activated, but it's now my wife Colin is activated for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aww.
So he is instantly ready to storm across the square. And make no wonder he then has such a go at Portia because he's like, my wife, my wife, my wife, my wife.
Yeah.
With the final congratulations for Anthony, Colin downs his drink and heads off. He's got a very busy afternoon ahead of him, after all. He's got an heir to sire in the next hour and a half. But before Colin leaves the scene, we do have a question.
One of our Patreon members, Tiff, said, on behalf of the horny little devils out there, fans have caught the sniff that Colin gives after he leaves the brothers' discussion, and some people think he hadn't washed his hands, ew, and he was still sniffing pen on his fingers. What do you guys think? I am so sorry. I have to know. I think that Veg would be appalled by the idea that he hadn't washed his hands after the carriage scene.
Correct.
It's been quite some time. So I'm just going to think that this was not related to that at all because, wow.
We've passed a meal time, surely.
I wonder if, I mean, he definitely had washed his hands.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
He had to have.
He'll have done a lot of things since last night.
Yeah.
He better have.
Yeah.
Maybe it was like a memory. It's like the Darcy flex.
Please don't tell me Colin's Darcy flex is sniffing his two fingers, please.
You can't deny that it kind of is, though.
Oh, Lord. Okay.
You can't deny it.
Moving on.
No, I think he's definitely washed his hands, but I think it's like, he's got a pen on the mind, you know?
No, I can't believe you're defending this theory. No, Luke was he just randomly decided to like sniff as he was walking out of the scene. I don't think it's related.
Or not even decided, he just did that.
Yeah. I think it's just an unconscious thing he did, for sure.
You know what, guys? You can retcon whatever you think.
Yeah. Anyway, we end the scene on Anthony and Benedict immediately turning to one another and saying, "Can you believe that? I did not know that." So we have conclusive proof that not a single Bridgerton saw it coming, which is kind of a shame, really. I would have loved for at least one of them to have suspected the Polin relationship all along. At least we have Profit High, though.
And Pink Bunny, our listener, asked us about this. She said, "I was thrown by the reactions to the engagement, or in some cases, the lack thereof. Which reaction surprised you the most? I expected Benedict to be onto it, but he was completely shocked by it. And yet most of the ton just acknowledged it and moved on. This bothers me so much."
Yeah.
Pink Bunny said, "I wanted more shock and payoff, but the story moved on from it pretty quickly. Why do you think the writers made that choice?"
Timing? I don't know.
The family, I can kind of understand. It's really fun, and I love the fics that have explored this. It's really fun to think about the Bridgertons all kind of being in on it, and Colin being the last to know. I don't know that the show had time to really
To get into that.
show that.
Yeah.
I would have loved for Benedict to have seen it, though. I mean, is Benedict notoriously the most perceptive human being when it comes to love?
No. But we do have those moments where he witnesses Colin abandoning him to go be with Penelope.
And he saw Colin being a complete weirdo after the dream.
Yeah.
I would have liked even just a line like, "Yeah, what can you do? He's an idiot," or something like, or like Anthony being like, "What the hell's been going on since I've been away?"
Yeah.
And Benedict just being like, "You know what? I don't interfere. I let it fall where it goes."
Actually, that would be the perfect response because it acknowledges that he knew and is letting it happen on its own terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just been like, it was just funny. It was just amusing to me to see it unfold.
Yeah.
And our listener, Nick, talked about, especially with Anthony and Benedict's reaction to finding out about Pen and Colin. They said it was a missed opportunity. They seemed stunned and said they had no idea. It would have been brilliant if Benedict had said something along the lines of "about time," or explains why Colin always threw him over in favour of Pen at every ball. As you said, Lecky.
Yeah.
And it would have tied all those little moments when Colin had walked off from Benedict throughout the seasons, everything like that. I agree.
Yeah.
Before we leave the scene, our listener, Late, said, "We Polin fans tend to voice confusion at how none of the Bridgerton siblings knew beforehand there was something between Pen and Colin, and at family member surprise looks when the announcement came, except for Violet's epiphany one day before the big event."
Delightful.
We got there in the end, guys.
He works fast in her defence.
Yeah, I think she figured it out at the Innovations Ball. So
Yeah.
she maybe had like 2 days advance notice.
Yeah.
She's perceptive, that one. How did none of them seem to notice? Except this scene seems to betray that assumption. If you watch Benedict. The fuck is Benedict?
Just call them that. That's perfect.
God, that's a ship name, lovely.
If you watch, or Banthony, no, Benedict. It seems it's not a surprise at all. It seems to be they all might have joked about Polin's friendship all along and even anticipate the two of them might eventually end up together. I think there's something in that maybe they didn't know, but maybe they were like...
Just like Colin, yeah.
Yeah.
You know when someone tells you something and you're like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Because when Colin explains his feelings for Pen, they clearly love Pen. They don't disparage her or question Colin's choice. There is no surprise for them there, except that Colin came to a realisation. The phrasing of that is so funny. There's no surprise, except that Colin came to a realisation.
Except that Colin used his fucking brain for once in his life.
Oh my God.
Well done, Colin.
Well, Kate's back with the single Bridgerton brain cell. She's passed it over. Oh God. A realisation they all seem to agree with. Benedict brains in Anthony when Colin mentions how swiftly the proposal happens, and Anthony admits Pen and Colin are marrying for all the right reasons. How do you know, Anthony? Were you been there? Anyway, Anthony even makes sure that Colin pronounces his love to Pen in the same way he described it to them. How romantic is that? I'd love to hear your take on this much overlooked scene and what A and B are thinking throughout this gloriously brotherly conversation.
Late. I love your point about how they don't disparage Ben or really question Colin's choice. They actually listen to him and they realize that he really is in love with her and is being truthful. So I really love that point. Yeah.
And also, like, the Featheringtons are a ridiculous family, but they've spent so much time with Penelope as an individual.
Think of that awkward
Dinner.
Yeah, the awkward dinner with the Featheringtons and the Bridgertons from season 1, where Anthony looks like he wants to die. Like, he's sitting at the table with the Featheringtons, and Philippa's making the remark about the leek soup, and he's just like, fucking kill me now. But, you know, we're not seeing that Anthony here. He is actually delighted for Colin, and I feel like he does approve of his choice in Penelope, like Violet said in that cutscene.
Oh, that's sweet. And yeah, they do know Pen. She's always been there. Had Daphne been there, our girl Daphne would have had it figured out in 2 seconds.
Yeah, for sure.
Had Kate been there, she'd have figured it out in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can forgive the family not knowing, but it does bother me about the ton. And we might talk about this in the engagement ball rewatch because
beyond Cressida, no one really catches on,
Isn't the whole point that it's like ridiculous to think that they'd be together? And then they just don't, like, no one reacts. Like at the wedding, at the ball, everyone's like, oh yeah, those two would totally be together. Or maybe it's like the Cressida thing where everyone's like, yeah, of course they got together. But we don't even see the Lords reacting or anything to it.
No, I just want to see.
Yeah. And not that I want people to openly be jeering at Pen in the street. Don't get me wrong, but a little bit more of a reaction other than people being like, oh, that's cool, isn't it? He's apparently the most eligible bachelor of the season.
It's true.
Yeah. Another wedding to go to.
Oh, you know, that's actually a great idea because in 301, I think it's Miss Goring who questions him about his plans for the season and whether or not he's going to marry. So it'd be really funny if we saw Miss Goring reading the paper and just kind of looking really put out.
Yeah, like, oh, a liar, are you then?
Yeah. Yeah.
But overall, I do love this scene between ABC. But their dynamics are always my favourites. But I love Anthony's tone, Ben having the time of his life, Colin being a little bit evasive, wondering if he's going to be reprimanded, but still fully embracing the truth of how he feels. Like you say, Lecky, he's not ashamed of it. He's like, yeah, I love her. And what? Come for me. Before we follow Colin over to the Featherington house, do you have any final tidbits about this scene, Lecky, you want to share?
Quite a bit, actually. So, during the Thunderbolt speech, Colin also initially explained that he has known Penelope most of his adult life, adding, she has always been there. Ring a bell, anyone? This to me seems like Dream Colin walking out of his cutscene from 303, now awake Colin, realizing it has always been the two of them from the start.
Cute, but I have a bone to pick. He would have said adult life.
Yeah.
No. Get in the bin. I'm glad that was cut. I am not having the timeline being fucked about with even more than it already has been.
You mean in terms of when they met?
That would have been confusing.
I will not validate that. They have known each other since they were little. Penn literally said it in season 1.
They could have just cut adult.
Yeah, well, I hope they would have done, because I'm not having that.
Yeah. Anyway.
Not having that.
Anyway, it was cut entirely, so you can't get that mad.
Oh, God. I'm sure that was why as well.
Yeah, thank you.
If nothing else, they are very strict and worried about the timeline.
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely. God, I can't take it.
This scene actually played out a bit differently in the original script as well, because instead of first confronting Colin, Anthony interrogated Benedict about his morning stroll, correctly deducing that he was with a lady, which Benedict, in fact, admits. The scene description here suggests that Colin was relieved that Anthony targeted Ben first as well, feeling the slightest bit nervous about Anthony's reaction.
Also, I have to say, I'm not being funny, and I love Benedict a lot, I really do, but if Anthony had to interrogate Benedict every time he'd been out sleeping with someone, I mean, we'd really not get much done in the show. Like, we have to kind of just let some things happen, you know?
Yeah. As the conversation continued, Anthony finds out that Colin hasn't met Ben's widowed lover, and Ben explains he's trying to keep her separate from the family at her insistence, revealing she has a number of rules.
Oh, okay.
When Anthony asks if this troubles him, the scene description says that Ben can't hide that he would prefer more, but he redirects and brings up Colin's news, and so then the rest of the scene kind of plays out as it does in the show. But then later in the scene, after Anthony urges Colin to confess his love, he originally offers similar advice to Benedict as well, encouraging Ben to tell Lady Tilly how he felt, explaining, I spent too long not truly speaking to Kate. I'm lucky I did not lose her in the process.
Right, because in our rewatches, you have been picking up on this kind of cut storyline throughout the whole of season 3, where Benedict was into Lady Tilly.
Really into her. Yeah, and that she kept him at arm's length.
And they completely reframed it in the edit.
Yeah.
It's wild to me. And it makes sense, right? Because when you're watching it in episode 7 or episode 8, whichever it is, when like Lady Tilly like confesses her love, or whatever. And Benedict's like, actually, I'm just good just hanging around with people.
Yeah.
And people are like, what?
Yeah, it was really confusing. It did seem like it was going the other way, even with the edits.
Yeah, so Justice for Beans, it was her idea that Benedict would have been burned by Lady Tilly.
Yeah.
And there were kind of clues that was maybe the original way they were going to go.
Yeah, and imagine Anthony, like, consoling Ben. It's an interesting one for sure. Okay, so the Bridgerton family are more or less thrilled by the news, Elle notwithstanding. But how's Portia handling it, Lek?
Not too well, sadly. Over at the Featherington house, we find Portia moodily staring across the street at the Bridgerton house. Guess it runs in the family.
She's also standing in the exact same place that Penelope and Colin will stand in during the epilogue, which I think is such a cute connection. It's the whole growth of the mother and daughter being completely at odds. They're like standing on opposite sides of the room, and they'll end up as one happy family at the end of the season. But we've got quite a while to get to that point yet. Pen enters the room looking like an angel from on high. I know we've already mentioned the dress, but oh my God, I have to talk about it again. It's just, I think it's my favourite. Is it my favourite?
No, it's not. It's a good one.
You've said before it's your favourite, but we changed, didn't we?
I think it's a daily change. I was thinking about this last night, and I was thinking her romantic look when she has the conversation with Portia about doubling in 304 might be my favourite at the moment. But this one's good.
Library for me.
That is a good one. Well, she looks ethereal.
Anyway, sorry. I absolutely love the standoff between Portia and Pen, how Pen kind of steels herself for the argument that is about to unfold. I think her reaction shows that she's still in the same headspace that she was during their last conversation, where she realized Portia only cared if she had a ring on her finger. And Pen is surprised to learn that Portia doesn't approve now of which ring she has on her finger.
Portia is pissed that she's found out the news through Whistledown. I mean, very technically speaking, if she's read it in Whistledown, then she did find out through Penelope. So,
true. Yeah, semantics, yeah.
I suppose probably not the best to bring that up to her right now, though. Portia says Pen's been hiding out in her room all day, which does give us a little bit of a timeline for the day, which we'll come back to later on. So it has to be at least the afternoon, which means Colin's had some time in the morning to get a certain house ready.
Yes. And Portia tells Pen, happy, is that what you think this is?
And our lovely friend Purple Cat asked us, I always wonder why Portia is so against the match with Colin. She mentions Marina. Does she think Colin won't go through the marriage if Pen trapped him like Marina did? Or is it just that Portia prefers Debling? What do you think, guys?
Yeah, I was thinking about this on my latest rewatch, and I did see more of the perspective of that Marina of it all this time around than I had before.
Because if you think what Portia thinks about Colin, she thinks him as the boy that easily fell into a trap.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
Like, he walked into it. They didn't even, like, need to go through with the whole entrapping. He just walked straight into it with his proposal. And then she also sees a boy, in her perspective, who broke off an engagement with one Featherington relative. So you're going from Lord Debling, who, yeah, he's a bit boring, maybe not the best match, whatever, but he's at least a certainty in that he might not stick around, but he'll give Pen, and crucially her family, the security of money and rank, versus Colin, who has already proven he's flighty when it comes to engagements.
That's exactly the word I was going to use, yes.
I mean, he is, you can't deny him. I love him, but he is.
Yeah.
He runs off abroad at the drop of a hat.
Yeah.
He's walked back into the season saying he's no intention of getting married. And suddenly, apparently he wants to marry her daughter. Like, you can understand the surprise of it all for Portia.
Yeah, I almost don't even think she actually believes that Penelope entrapped him. I think that's almost something that comes out just because she's so frustrated by the situation.
Yeah.
But I think her primary concern here is how flighty Colin is, and that Debling was a sure thing, and that has been thrown away. And we know that Portia values security, so Penelope has risked everything on something that isn't secure.
I mean, we know from way back when what Portia thinks about Pen's relationship with Colin. She recognises they've got a long history by being neighbours and through Eloise and everything, but she completely disregarded it back in 201. You know, we might as well be calling her Catherine the Great in this entire rewatch, because she is so certain that it doesn't mean anything and it's a waste of time to spend time on fantasy like that. So I think this is more about Colin than it is Penelope, but in such a Portia way, she takes it out on Pen, like she does in her entire parenting style. So I think it's coming for concern for Pen and a little bit of self-preservation for herself and the Featheringtons as a family unit.
Yeah.
But I also wonder, like, does Portia recognise herself in Pen in this moment and find it frustrating? I wonder if something like this happened to Portia before. It's kind of what Portia said to Marina back in, like, 103, I think, when she was taking Marina to the impoverished streets of London. And she's like, men are really quick to say that they love you in the moment, but they don't stick around for the aftermath.
Oh, yeah, that little school trip.
That makes me want to see a spin-off even more, because I wonder if Portia in her past had like a compromising situation with a gentleman where she either planned to entrap him or she could have but didn't. Do you know what I mean? There's so much to unpack there.
Or where she fell in love and he promised her the world, and then for whatever reason he couldn't see it through, and look at the after effects that she had to grapple with for life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I always laugh when Portia completely drags Colin by saying that Penn has thrown out a secure match for a fancy on the neighbour boy.
Yeah. Well, we do know he loves the fanciful, so.
Well, he does. And Veg, you'll agree with me on this one. It's such an Americanism calling him a neighbour boy.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, that's not a phrase that you'd hear.
Fancy on the neighbour boy.
So it always just makes me laugh. It's like, you spent a lot of time with Jack talking about the Americas, did you?
Aw. My heart does break for Penelope, though, as she says, I do not think it's unreasonable. Colin cares for me. She knows others will think it's an unlikely match, but she's really believed what Colin told her in the carriage. She believes he wants to be with her. But Portia cuts through her certainty by making Penn realize that Colin hasn't actually said he loves her. You can see doubt flooding in for her, and her resolve starts to fracture.
Oh, poor Penn. Portia pityingly regards her daughter before reminding her how the Bridgertons treated them like dogs after the Marina fallout. It is understandable that that's in the forefront of Portia's mind when it comes to entanglements with the Bridgertons.
Yeah.
She then brutally calls Penelope out for being out all hours of the night with no chaperone, and then he traipses in this morning with news of an engagement to the very same Bridgerton boy, using Lord knows what wiles to entrap him. Ouch. Well, it seems she has been keeping track of when Penn is slipping in and out.
Yeah. She definitely took notice of Penelope's absence this time around. Mm-hmm. I wonder if she's actually noticed in the past, like how often Penelope has, slipped out of balls and stuff, setting up that conversation with Cressida where all the pieces kind of fit into place for her. But kind of like I said before, I don't think that Portia thinks that Penelope entrapped Colin. I think she's
parenting in that way that she does, where she's so worried about the family and her daughters that it comes out in this really negative way where,
yeah.
I mean, Penelope doesn't see that perspective in that moment, which is what counts, right? Penelope sees it as an attack on, of course, this man doesn't love you.
Yeah.
Of course, this is make-believe.
And that even if Colin got swept up in a moment with her, it didn't mean anything.
And of course, she brings up the notion of entrapping him, which ricochets throughout the rest of the season. But is her fear coming from Colin's unreliability rather than an assessment of Penn? It looks like it, but the damage is still done, regardless of her intention, I think.
Yeah.
But big mistake, Portia, huge, because at those very words, Colin Bridgerton and an excellent blue coat storm into the drawing room, and he is pissed at what he's just heard.
Mm-hmm. And I must give a shout out to how perfectly Colin's dark coat swooshes into the scene.
Yes.
It's a perfect coat movement, as always. It's just sad it's not our beloved pirate jacket, which has truly died.
Yeah.
We'll miss you, sweet prince. Fly high with the angels.
Gone.
But we are so happy we still get some cool coat action regardless.
They know how to make a coat on the show.
Yeah. This is like his I'm going to be a husband now jacket as well, isn't it? Like, this sweeps around the scenes.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Penn reels at the sight of him and turns away in horror and probably mortification at what he's just overheard. Varley helpfully announces his arrival. Thanks for that, Varley.
Yes.
And Portia scrambles to maintain her facade and welcomes him, but Colin immediately bites back. As he tells her he won't be staying long, Portia tries to cover for herself by saying, that was not meant for your ears, to which Colin loses his shit and shouts,
I am still speaking.
We are engaged.
I love it so much. Oh, no, it's beautiful. God, I love this moment. Luke Newton talked about how intimidating it felt to go up against such a titan of acting like Polly Walker in this scene.
Yeah.
And what it was like to have Colin really hold his own against Portia. I think he does it so well. Like, Colin 100% captures that moment. And it's not always a quality that you see in him. He's gentle and soft and sensitive.
But also Polly plays into this moment so well.
What a match.
She's immediately cowed by him in a way that you never really see Portia being cowed by anybody.
And we'll get to this in a second, but this is what really proves it to Portia as well. She doesn't remain angry at Colin for the rest of the time being like, how dare you embarrass me? She's like, oh, you are going to step up. You are going to look after her.
Yeah.
Also, how great is season 4 going to be if we have any kind of conversation between these two, like whether they're arguing, whether they're best friends, they're squeezing the cheeks. They just have a great natural on-screen chemistry, I think.
And again, this moment is based on the book.
In the book, the engagement announcement works a little bit in reverse. So it's actually Penelope's house that they've pulled up outside of, and they head straight in. Colin, I assume, retrospectively asking Portia for her permission to marry Penn. And it's the gathering of all the Featheringtons. It's the Featherington Tuesday. And it's this moment where Portia just really doesn't recognise that he's asking to marry Penelope. And she really devaluates Penelope in that scene. And it's quite comical as well of Colin increasingly getting angrier and angrier and angrier at Portia's dismissive behaviour. And then it all builds up until...
But Colin also loses his temper with Portia saying, "Mrs. Featherington, I suggest you begin treating my future wife with a bit more respect." Penelope tells him it's not necessary, but Colin insists that it is. He goes on to defend Penelope by saying she's lovely and intelligent and has a fine sense of humour. Who wouldn't want to marry a woman like that?
So what has Show Colin got to say for himself?
Colin tells Portia, "Your daughter did not entrap me. I proposed to her out of love, nothing less. And were you not so narrowly concerned over your own standing, you might see that Penelope is the most eligible amongst you. In the future, I advise you not to sully our Bridgerton name."
Oh, Bridgerton name.
By suggesting otherwise.
So good.
I guess so, but this is like the first time.
Difference of opinion about it.
I'm sorry, it is so good. Thank you, Colin. But when he starts talking about the Bridgerton name, I'm like, what the fuck do you care? And then that's some major plot point. So that last line can go, but the rest can absolutely stay.
It's just he's immediately married to her in his head, I think.
Yeah, they could have just swapped in a "my wife" there, and you would have had the same meaning. He's also invoking the Bridgerton name to protect Penelope, reminding Portia of just how prominent and powerful the family is. It's kind of interesting because he's almost reminding her of the words she spoke just last episode about how people could do much worse than be connected to the Bridgertons, which Portia has kind of forgotten about because she's instead focused on the idea that this engagement might fall apart. In the book and in the show, there are also references to how Penelope's association with the Bridgertons could help keep her from harm, and how Colin specifically wants to protect Penelope with his family name, which they could be alluding to here as well.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, that in that moment, he is including Penelope in his family immediately. It's just that moment they're instantly together in his head, like Colin, my wife Bridgerton, fully activated.
It's more than that. They're not just linked as a couple, but he already envisions her as part of like the extended Bridgerton family.
Yeah. And that's what Luke said about the carriage scene and how Colin approached Penelope with consent and checking in on her, because he has always seen her as a part of the family. It's just the role she holds is slightly shifted now.
I have to draw attention to Pen's expression when she hears Colin confess his love for her and how well Nicola plays this moment. She just can't believe it, and she inhales, she gasps, and it's this state of disbelief that carries us into the mirror scene.
It's like in the book when Penelope tries to calm Colin when he's having a go at Portia. It says, "The truth was her heart was soaring. Penelope would have melted to the floor if she weren't already holding onto his hand."
Oh.
We're right there with you, Pen. I have become Puddle.
Yeah. In the book, the moment of Colin defending Penelope kind of shakes Portia, who insists that she does love Penelope. We see a more loving side to Portia after this, which I think is drawn out much more in the show, as we will discuss a little bit later in this episode. But Show Colin has no interest in spending any more time at the Featherington house and takes Penelope's hand in his and leads them both away.
And our listener, Sasha, had to praise Colin's little nod to Pen when he takes a hand after telling Portia off. It's like he's saying, let's get out of here.
Aww.
I love it. I have a lot of thoughts on this scene. I mean, I've just written Colin forever.
With a 4. 4 EVA is how it's written.
He's my wife's side. It's just everything to me. And then, of course, the entrapping.
Yes.
Tell you what, the Bridgertons have a way of listening to the insults that people throw at Penelope and then filing it away.
Away for other people, yeah. Even with Eloise and Cressida.
Yeah, so she overheard Cressida's calling her an insipid wallflower.
Yeah.
And then the first time she was mad at her, she was like, "Oh, I've got the insult straight for you." So Colin hears this, and I don't think at all, like you say, Portia believes it, and I don't think he believes it either. But it's that thing of when you love someone so much, you know exactly what to use
To hurt them.
to hurt them, which is what happens later on.
Yeah.
Death to all of them.
And as I've said, this massively changes the Portia-Colin relationship. I think what we said earlier about Portia really saw him as the neighbour boy who was easily misled, who is flighty. And I think this moment where he really stands up to her is transformative because he moves in her head to someone who could be the head of the household, which is partially what she's still looking out for as well.
Yeah.
And I think she really respects him for protecting her daughter and ultimately calling her out. And I think you have to read this scene in context of how Penelope called Portia out the night before. With Sibling, when she's like, "Do I only matter to you if I have a lord's ring on my finger?" And that was starting to fundamentally change something for Portia. And then you have this that comes in again and doubles down on it.
So true. Leading to that later scene with Varley where she's like, I've been too focused on our family's social standing and not enough on my daughters and their personal well-being and their feelings.
Yeah, which is what the social standing has always been motivated by. It's to look after her daughters, but how she's got lost in the way.
Mm-hmm. That's
what I really preach about the Portia storyline in part 2 is that it does make an impact. And completely from this point on, she's never a dick to Pen again, except for like episode 8, where she's like, what the fuck have you been doing?
Yeah. You had money while we've been eating potatoes, Penelope.
Yeah.
Great source of carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And of course, Colin storming out. And it's that sort of elevation from, I'm not just messing around with your daughter and hiding and sneaking her in late on a night. I'm looking after her now.
Also, I don't know if you included this, but a lot of our Patreon members asked us about the timeline of this, of them storming out and Penelope arriving in a daze. And I think that's just, you're supposed to feel her being swept away by him in that moment.
Oh.
Which ties into the whole, since he stormed that ballroom the night before, of Penelope just being pulled along the entire time and being like...
carried away before she can even take a breath. Exactly.
And before we leave the scene, I have to give a shout out to Varley's reaction and the way, for a start, I love that Portia looks over to her as like a confidant being like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And our listener Methman's mama said, I imagine Varley telepathically telling Portia, well, that would have been tits up.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Somebody meme that now, please.
Look, it's been a day of very heightened emotions for everyone involved. I think we should all relax by paying a visit to Sienna's house. Like, what the fuck is going on?
So the CGI of outside Colin's new home is an identical shot to one used in season 1 for Sienna's house. I actually think they might have flipped the shot to try to make it look a little bit different, or maybe it's just the house that Anthony kept for Sienna, so it is the same place. I think it's funnier if it is, to be honest.
I mean, Colin did say it'd been in the family for years, so...
Yeah, only recently cleaned out, in fact. You know, it also occurs to me that Pen might have liked the place's sordid history if she had learned that Anthony kept his past mistresses there, so I like it for that reason.
She would love it for that. Well, let's head inside to see exactly what's going on, shall we? We find ourselves in a very blue and yellow antechamber of a bedroom. The apartment clearly hasn't been used in a while, probably since, as you say, season 1. With the furniture and chandelier covered in sheets and trunks stacked up in corners, there's a very conspicuous chaise-longue in the middle of the room, artfully covered by a blue blanket and a protective sheet.
Protective sheet.
And most helpfully of all, there's a full-length mirror casually hanging out in front of it. Would you believe it? Although there is no dust sheet on the mirror, so I actually assume in reality it'd be very, very dusty.
Or Colin had already made a trip there to see if it would be a good home. And he's like, I actually really like this mirror. I'm just going to uncover this and I'll show it to Penelope when we come back. I don't know why, but I have a feeling I want to show this to her first. We'll talk more about Colin's apartment once they actually move in, but I love that it's all dark blue and yellow. How perfect for the Polin home. And it's a color palette that we now know they will be bringing over to the Featherington house in season 4.
The door opens and in walk Penelope and Colin. As Penelope looks around silently, Colin flourishes his arms and says, I wanted to show you this before our wedding. It's been in the family a very long time.
This is to be our home. Oh. His delivery of that is so good.
Home was anywhere with Penelope.
Oh, yeah, but his delivery of that line is so good. And as Pen simply blinks at him in silence, Colin is clearly confused by her lack of reaction. In fact, the script says that Colin feels self-conscious when Penelope doesn't immediately respond to him.
Oh, again, I love this about episode 5, how Colin is picking up on these tiny, strange moments from Penelope and is starting to realise something is missed because he's like, my wildest fantasies just came true and I'm on top of the world.
Yeah.
Why aren't you here with me?
Yeah, and meeting me in this moment, for sure. But Colin starts to move around the room, pulling the cloths off of the furniture in an effort to help Penelope envisage what their new home can become. We can sense his insecurity about what he is offering Penelope when he says, I know it does not look like much now, but once we lay out some of our furnishings and decorations.
Oh, this breaks my heart.
I know.
Because it's what he says during the Whistledown reveal when he's like,
It's me.
I thought it was all my fault. I thought it was me that was wrong.
Yeah.
And so every time she's faltering, he immediately defaults to, oh my God, I'm not good enough.
Yeah. And also that's so Colin of him, because even from season 1, especially in season 2, we see that he's so full of these insecurities that he's not enough and like trying to be the man that everyone wants him to be. And now he's not even the perfect fiance because his fiance is not seemingly happy with him.
And you know what? I don't even know if it's fully resolved by the time we get to episode 8. Because if you think about the reconciliation scene at the Bug Ball, he's like, I can't believe that someone like you would love someone like me.
When she doesn't respond.
And you want to be like, no, that's not the point. You'd be like, Colin, no, that's not what you're supposed to have learned. But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
I love this scene so much when he's pulling things off and trying to show her, because it reminds me of the scene from the Remarkable Shade of Blue scene when he's running around the room saying, imagine it with me, Pen.
Oh, yeah. Imagine our home.
He's trying to create that little world for them both, and he's asking her to join him and seeing it with him. He's like, I can see this as our future. Like, join me, won't you? Like, have some sort of physical, emotional reaction, please. And I always laugh when he talks about decorating the place. He's like, it's not anything now, but just wait until I've whacked those seashells on the wall. You're gonna bloody love it.
Just a little lick of yellow paint and we'll be there.
But still, nada from Pen. Colin is completely thrown by it and instead wonders if Pen is concerned that we should not be here alone. As far as he's concerned, they're about to be married, so what difference does it make?
I love that this is like the first time he's ever been concerned about them being alone together now that they're actually engaged.
Like that had been his approach with Marina, they all would have been fucked. Like, or, well, Marina wouldn't. Marina would have been fine. Her plan would have worked perfectly.
Yeah. It's also funny that you mentioned that because there's some parallels with the 208 drawing room scene where Colin pulled Penelope into an empty room. Pen in that scene actually anticipated a clandestine encounter but got something else. And here we kind of see the reverse. Remember, like, there was that hilarious meme where she thought she was going to get nailed.
Railed.
Same diff. She thought she was going to get railed, but alas, fam scandals. But
that mirror is suspiciously clean, Pen. That's all I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our listener, Debbie, spoke about this scene. She says, I love episode 5. It's such an emotional roller coaster. I just have one nitpick about what happens right after Colin takes down Portia. We see that Pen is in shock with how in awe she is by him defending her like that. But then when the scene cuts to the new house, she is still dumbstruck. Does that mean they left Featherington House and got in the carriage to travel across the square? I think they're travelling further than that, actually. And she stayed like that the whole time. No talk or gesture at all until they're upstairs in the bedroom. Yeah, do you think she just sat in silence the entire time?
I just touched on this, but I think you're supposed to just like buy into the magic of storytelling right now and just be swept along in the moment with Penelope. So you're almost being swept straight out of the Featherington home right into their new home together at the same time. You just have to kind of imagine that they teleported there almost.
Yeah.
Pretend that the commuting didn't happen. You know what I mean?
Do you know the one commute that I hope didn't happen is at the wedding? When he's like, I'll wait for you in the carriage.
Oh.
What the hell was that carriage ride home like?
Oh.
God. Well, another of our listeners, Coco, said, I thought about this too. I just imagined that Colin ranted about Portia's disrespect towards Pen the entire way over to their new home while Pen gazed at him in amazement. I do like that.
That's also acceptable,
Yeah.
but I think what they're going for is you're just supposed to be swept along with Pen in the moment.
Maybe she was just still in that daze and he's there shouting to all of them, we're engaged, out of the window.
Or no, he's like outside of the carriage, like tipping off literally every single footman so they can all like do his bidding. Don't tell anybody we're going alone unchaperoned to our new home together. Yeah.
But he is like so far in his plans that you can imagine that he didn't really notice how quiet she was being until they were just there. And he's like, oh my God, you've not reacted in the slightest.
Yeah. Oh, wait, no, sorry. I actually have one more comment about this because when they're leaving, you see him like fighting a smile as they're leaving after they've had sex for the first time. He's like very proud of himself. And I wonder on the way there if he was just stewing and like trying to keep this angry expression off his face. And then when they're leaving, you see the reverse where he's like blissfully happy and can't contain that emotion instead.
Well, just as Colin is spiralling over Pen's vow of silence, Pen finally decides to speak up and says, no, you do not realise how much that meant to me. What you said to my mother. No one has ever stood up for me like that.
Oh,
poor Pen.
There's also a little bit of cut dialogue here. Firstly, Pen originally said, no one has ever stood up for me like that, not even myself, which I thought was heartbreaking.
That's interesting. I'm kind of glad am I glad they took it out? Because in one way, it's good because she stands up for herself all the time through Whistledown. But again, it's not in an honest way.
But not to Portia. Not really.
Well, she bites at Portia through Whistledown, though.
Yeah. Well, through Whistledown, but I mean, in person against her mother, she's had like snide remarks and like bratty comments or whatever, but she's never like really stood up to Portia.
Yeah.
Actually, no. You know what? I disagree with that because in season 1 in Swish, before they're going over to have dinner with the Bridgertons, and she's like, Violet will see right through you and your plan. So maybe they realized that wasn't quite accurate.
Yeah, but she's not really stood up for herself, I suppose, in that way. And she's taken a lot from society.
Oh, God, that's a good point. Yeah.
I think I like that they took it out, though, because her face is just so awestruck.
Yeah.
And as if I hadn't melted enough already this episode, Colin replies, "Oh, I will always stand up for you because I love you, Pen." Oh.
I wonder if a reason they may have cut that also is so that it's focused on Colin's gesture as opposed to her own self-reflection on the fact that she's never stood up for herself. It's supposed to be about Colin's romantic gesture.
Yes. Yeah, it's supposed to be about what Colin's done. And Colin immediately supplies what she was missing. The only thing she didn't have was him literally saying, "I love you, Pen." And he immediately does that. I mean, suppose Anthony told him to go do it.
Assuaged.
And so for Penelope, that's all of her doubts immediately eased. This scene sponsored by Anthony. Thank you, Sienna. Thank you, season 1.
And for Colin, my wife Bridgerton fans, he also initially said, "I will always stand up for you, not only because you are to be my wife, but because I love you, Pen."
I think that's good cut because
Yeah.
you shouldn't really have like anything negating in that sentence.
That's true. But if you wanted to know if he said my wife, he did originally.
He did. He has said my wife. Said the words.
Not just because I'm legally obligated, but
Right.
It's always nice to know where people stand with you, isn't it? Oh, with Portia's words still ringing in her ears, Penelope, with tears in her eyes, whispers, "Are you sure?"
It's kind of ironic how Pen is asking for Colin's assurance that he loves her, but she doesn't return the sentiment.
Absolutely. She never confesses her love for him in this scene, just as she didn't in the carriage. And she won't until halfway through episode 6. He keeps laying his heart out for her, but he doesn't actually get the same verbal reassurance back. I think as Penelope fans, and for Penelope herself, her love is just so enduring and unquestionable for her that...
She almost thinks it doesn't need to be said.
Yeah, but I also think confessing how long she's loved him is also quite a vulnerable thing.
It is, but I wonder if it's such a reality for her, and that's been her reality for so long that she wouldn't even think to respond that way.
Yeah, she's staring at him in amazement, being like, "I can't believe that you love me." Whereas obviously she loves him. That's been her entire worldview since she was tiny. But the absence of something so obvious for her just bleeds in this insecurity for Colin. And it all adds to make him more and more insecure as he goes on. It makes him painfully convinced that he's the problem and that he's lacking in some way, while she's just staring at him utterly wide-eyed,
Dazed.
adoring. It's that classic way that she used to look at him in season 1 and season 2, like he just hung the moon for her, which he literally had just done.
Yeah. This is really the start of him kind of doubting that she returns his feelings, and in turn, because he's likely paying closer attention to her, helps him realize that something is amiss.
And once again, our lovely friend Purple Cat raised the timeline of it all, saying, "Has Colin been up all night packing? When did he wake up the army of servants to lug his belongings over from Bridgerton House? When did he even ask if he could use this house?
Maybe he didn't ask.
Do the other Bridgertons even know? Is it morning, early afternoon? Pen is having a very crazy life-altering 12 hours.
Maybe there's a repeat of the 208 scene where Anthony is confronting Colin about the accounts. He's like, "Were you going to tell me that you hired a bunch of people to clean out my former mistress's apartment and that you've made it your new home?" You know? Like, what is this about?
And that's what he says to her. It's like, "This is our home." It's not like in the book, is it, where he's already living there. And it's like, of course, you'll move in. He is completely envisioning, he's like, when we hang up our decorations together, we'll make this our home together.
I just have a funny headcanon that Anthony is over at the Bridgerton house and all of a sudden there's like no servants around. He's like, "Where the fuck are all the staff?" And it's Colin's finally taken note of the staffing issues and restaffed his new home across town.
We've redeployed them because it is very quick. I think if I had to have a theory about how this actually works in the world, I think it's a bit like Romancing Mr. Bridgerton in that he's come home from his travels and he takes up a bachelor residence in Bloomsbury. My theory is that Colin had already started to move in or was intending to move in. And that's how there were trunks in there already and stuff like that. But he hadn't had the time, / had been way too emotionally destroyed at the thought of losing Pen, that he hasn't quite got around to moving in yet.
Oh, I'd like the hilarity of him doing it that morning. But that makes sense.
I do like that. But like, where'd you get the keys from?
He stole them from Anthony's study.
I suppose Anthony wasn't there, was he? So he just came back. Yeah, I know what you mean, like complete chaos, Colin. He's like, I instantly got us a home 6 hours after I was in the carriage.
Also, Violet knew about Sienna and that he had a place for his mistress, right? Back in season 1. So maybe the brothers had also ingested that knowledge and Colin's like, "I know where I can move my new wife."
It's like, off we go.
As far as timing goes, we know from Portia's conversation with Pen that this scene is taking place later in the day, probably in the afternoon. I bet Colin jumped out of bed first thing and immediately started putting things into action. He'd gone from thinking he'd lost her for good to finally having having her, and I think his immediate concern would be taking care of her. He just wants to start their life together as soon as possible, so this is really the first part of making his dreams their shared reality.
Yeah, I think it's very sweet that he doesn't actually move in until he marries Pen, but that ends up completely depressing, so let's move on rather quickly, shall we? Because as Pen asks if Colin is sure, Colin replies, "Everything I said to your mother is true." And guess what catches that man's eye? That full-length mirror handily standing next to them both. Call it a flash of inspiration or a long-held mirror fetish, but Colin Bridgerton has an idea in mind, and you should see it as well. Guys, it is on. The mirror scene is finally here. Polish up that looking glass, dear listeners. It's about to get pretty steamed up. Before we start undressing their Lek, give me all the mirror lore. It's been a long time coming.
Also, the mirror promo is one of my favorite things in existence. But anyway.
We will touch on that, don't we?
Jess Brunel talked about this scene to Cosmopolitan, saying, "It's really just a reference in the book. There's not an actual scene, but we knew fans have really taken to this moment, and we wanted to honor it." Book fans, you will all know exactly what she is talking about. During Polin's first time in the book, Colin gets rather distracted by Penelope's chest. We all know he's a boob guy. And he tells her,
Sorry. "I want to see you sitting up.
He groaned.
So I can see them full and lovely and large. And then I want to crawl behind you and cup you."
His lips found her ear and his voice dropped to a whisper.
Whisper veg.
"And I want to do it in front of a mirror."
She squeaked.
Now?
He seemed to consider that for a moment, then shook his head.
"Later."
He said, and then repeated it in a rather resolute tone.
"Later." I like how we discussed that we didn't think she meant do it in front of a mirror. You made us realise a few episodes ago, or like 50 episodes ago, he probably didn't mean do it. Let's do it in front of a mirror.
Right. He meant cupping.
Yeah.
The act of cuppage.
Listeners, we talked about this scene at length, I have no doubt, in our book rereads episode way back when. And yeah, I don't know if it's like a misinterpretation of the line sometimes by fans, but he is talking about cupping her in front of the mirror, not having sex with her in front of the mirror. Although, I mean, I'm sure it kind of leads to the same.
Let's do it.
Interpret it as you wish.
So as Jess points out, it's not a real scene from the book.
Yeah.
And this is something that anecdotally book fans will tell you from the time, is that they were outraged that they had this scene in Romancing Mr. Bridgerton and then got to the end of the book and they were like, what the fuck was later then?
Oh, yeah.
So it's been like a 20-year crusade to get this imaginary book scene into real life. Fun fact is that the mirror hint was one of the very first clues about season 3 that we ever heard in 2022.
Yeah.
During promo for season 2 still, wasn't it? Nicola Coughlan was asked if she could tell us anything about season 3 and she just said mirror. So the writing team knew they wanted to include the scene in the show, but instead chose to actually incorporate the mirror scene into Pen and Colin's first time.
In an interview with Shondaland, the director of the episode, Billy Woodruff, talked about the challenge of capturing that scene. Billy reflected that even though he's had a lot of experience in filming intimate scenes across television and music videos, he recognized the unique narrative significance of the scene for Penelope and Colin. He said, once I read this and understanding what this really means in the Bridgerton world, it was just very important. I was like, okay, I'm used to doing this, but I've got to really navigate all of these things that are happening within this one scene. Penelope is in love with him. She's losing her virginity, but she's afraid. She wants to be with him. It was very important to Jess that this was all coming through, that the lens was through her eyes, so that was the approach. Billy also talked about the pressure he felt given Bridgerton's reputation for its sex scenes, especially with Daphne and Simon's infamous montage in season 1. However, he ultimately recognized that Polin's story is its own thing, and that they were able to find the magic that was on the page, in the words, in the scene. In bringing the story to life, Billy explained that we storyboarded it, and I met with both of the actors, and we worked with the intimacy coordinator to make sure everyone was comfortable. It was like a magical dance, you know what I mean? Him wanting her to see the beauty that he sees in her. And I wanted to make sure viewers could feel that, how she felt very vulnerable, and that he is like, no, you have to see how beautiful you are. It just played out in a very organic way. It was just a bit challenging because it wasn't a typical love scene, but they nailed it.
So let's return to the apartment, shall we? Colin turns Pen to face the mirror and, with music beginning to swell, presumably along with other parts, he begins to tell Penelope, "You are the cleverest, bravest woman I've ever known. You make me feel seen in ways I've never felt seen before. And then there is the way your hair cascades down your shoulder, the way your eyes shine when you look at me, like 2 blue pools, the firmness of your lips parted just so, the softness of your skin. And then there are other parts I've been dreaming about." I am dead, absolutely dead. I mean, for a start, the entire way that this is filmed in this montage, dreamy sequence, handled so well by Billy Woodruff. But if we break down what he's actually saying to her, he says, "You are the cleverest, bravest woman I have ever known." And the dual qualities of cleverness and bravery is something that recurs throughout the seasons, especially in season 3. So in 301, he says, "You are clever and warm, and I'm proud to call you my very good friend." In 306, when he's surprised to learn that Whistledown is Cressida, he says, "I always imagined Lady Whistledown might be more clever, perhaps." And then finally, during the resolution in 308, he says, "I have been envious of you, of your success, of your bravery, and now I simply cannot believe that a woman with such bravery loves me." And I think that's interesting because cleverness and bravery are obviously very Penelope, but they're also very Whistledown as well.
Oh, yeah.
And he doesn't even know that yet, but
He appreciates those qualities.
yeah. And it's interesting that what he sees in her and recognizes about Penelope is the Whistledown traits in her that she's been hiding. So even though he struggles with who she is, he ultimately has always been entranced by what she is.
And it also kind of ties into the language used in the purpose scene where Colin was intently listening as Penelope shared that her purpose would challenge her to be brave and witty. But here, Colin is describing her as brave and clever, which I think is significant.
And then, of course, that second line that Colin feels seen by her, I think sadly that sets up how far the fall will be for him, because I think he's always felt really seen by her. And so when he finds out that she's been lying to him, I think in his mind, everything collapses as a lie. So her love, the way that she sees him and believes in him.
And all those insecurities come flaring back.
And the way that Colin feels seen by Penelope is such an important part of their relationship, predating this romantic side of their relationship. All the way back in season 2, for example, during the infamous "You Do Not Count" scene, he says, "Your letters were so encouraging. I thought if Penelope can see me this way, then surely I can too." So much of the way he sees himself and believes in himself is linked to the way that Penelope sees him.
Yeah.
And I think it's so ironic that he's listing all of these qualities whilst not knowing the entire picture.
The truth of her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it really reinforces the idea that Colin is drawn to the core truth of who Penelope is, even if a part of that is Whistledown. It sets up the struggle he will have once he finds out the truth, reconciling his version of her with her secret identity. This reconciliation ends up being the realization that Penelope is all of these things and always has been, no matter which name she has gone by.
But then moving on to, the slightly more physical, Lecky.
Well, I love that Colin's confession points to not just her physical beauty, but the qualities about her that he finds beautiful, as you kind of touched on.
Well, that's not going to stop him rhapsodizing about her physical qualities, though, is it? As he lingers on her hair, her eyes, oh my gosh, the way he caresses her lips.
That's a good moment, yeah.
And those other parts that he speaks so fondly of. Little cupping happening there. So, but Colin, you've indicated after all these years.
I'm okay with the cuppage. I have to say, though, that I'm not a huge fan of the 2 blue pools line. I guess he just really likes water imagery, if you remember his dramatic speech about swimming from Abide Us to Cestus in season 1. So I just feel like, I don't know, I feel like he could have been a little more creative there.
Colin, you're a writer, babe.
You know what? Maybe he just really likes swimming in her eyes, in her gaze, but still.
And again, our lovely friend Purple Cat said, "The one thing I would change through this is Colin's description of Pen's eyes. Surely he could do better than 2 blue pools."
Yeah.
I was hoping he might compare the colour to the azure waters of the Mediterranean or something like that. If you describing Pen's attributes, what would you compare them to?
Oh.
Yes, I agree. The eyes should either be the Aegean, but actually technically her eyes are too light for the Aegean, so the Ionian Sea would be more fitting, which is near Paxos.
Yeah, I support that. I'd rather he compare her eyes to a sea than 2 blue pools.
And yeah, like the flame of her hair and...
Even if it's a little cliche.
He's entranced by like Venus in the book. And sort of that comparison to... although I suppose technically she can't be Venus because she's already bloody Psyche, isn't she? Mixed mythology, guys. Mixed mythology.
It'd be fine. I guess I'm talking about him caressing her breast now, so...
Yeah. I'm going to keep that in.
That's the opener to the episode.
Him caressing her breast is a nod to how Colin is a boob guy in the book without being super gratuitous, like with the carriage scene. I have to give kudos to Billy Woodruff for how this scene is filmed. Billy has done a lot of work in music videos, and so this was a really good choice for directing a scene and an episode like this.
Yeah, it's a really clever way to have filmed it, isn't it? Because you have the music naturally playing, which we'll talk about later, but it is that really intimate close-up montage, those extreme close-up shots, the way the music is sweeping.
And they switch to narration, to voiceover. And later, as we get further into the mirror scene, the scene description says that they're like skipping through time. And I feel like you can feel that as soon as he starts to make his confession and undress her.
And again, like Penn is totally swept in this moment, as we see. And it obviously makes sense that Whistledown isn't even a thought in her brain at a moment like this. It's like the carriage scene where she's just so
absorbed,
entranced by the moment that she's been completely swept away by it. But I think the way it was filmed and everything about this is so magical, like the bursts of light that come through as they're leaning forward to one another. Oh.
Yeah, and seeing as though we're getting a lot of lingering shots of Penelope now, it's time. Let's deep dive. I promised you all a deep dive earlier. Let's deep dive into her gorgeous hair and makeup. We've already waxed poetic about the dress, but let's hear it for the rest of the look.
Yeah, if he's going to appreciate her two blue pools or whatever, we can appreciate the makeup emphasizing those pools.
So, Jessie Deal, Nicola's season 3 primary makeup artist, said that in this scene she wanted the makeup to blend with the dress and create a delicate yet striking effect. She also wanted the skin to be ultra glowy, and I love this. Like, I think Penn just looks so glowing throughout this whole episode. And despite the Lady Whistledown worry of it all, it kind of reflects how internally she can't help but be so happy that, like, all her childhood dreams have just been realised.
She's also ovulating, but we'll get to that later.
She is also ovulating.
That's the factor.
And exciting news. For those who want to recreate Penn's makeup look here, you can. As Jessie shared in her Instagram post that she used Hourglass Cosmetics Curator eyeshadow in the shade BID, B-I-D, which is a light olive colour. Not sponsored, but it's on their website, so you can buy.
Colin's out there naming eyeshadow palettes as well with his descriptive language, I guess.
Nick's primary hair artist, Farida Gwedhar, also shared some insights on Instagram about Penn's hair look too, which I wanted to speak about here because they are very adorable and so well thought out. She said that for the mirror look, the action was the deciding factor in the direction of the hairstyle. So she essentially wanted one that when Colin, spoiler, takes the hairpin out, looked great doing it.
Like more dramatic.
Because it has to do something in the scene, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just her appearance, it's part of the action.
She said, I looked at updos that were higher than the head to make the unpinning of the hair visible from the front and let gravity help. And the hairpin that falls to the floor is, I believe, known as a French chignon hairpin. If you're making a list of things to create your pen cosplay.
Yeah.
Your own mirror pen look. Yeah.
Look, I've got a full-length mirror just there, so...
Oh, boys, sign up.
Yeah, she's available.
I love how her hair gives way when Colin pulls the pin out. So major kudos to that thought process that went into it. So good. And I also, side note, hope that Colin picked the hairpin up for Penn later on. Hot? Yes.
Yeah.
Romantic? Sure. But don't make me pick shit up afterwards.
Also, his boots were right there, so he could easily have like trampled on it as well.
Yeah, I think one of our Patreon members was like, babe, you nearly stood on it and squished it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Or she could have stepped on it too. You know what I mean? You have to be careful of bare feet.
It would have hurt. We'd have had that hand wrap scene all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah, but with a foot, is it quite the same?
Well, some people are into that.
The legs in the equation and hands can wander. Yeah.
He does like trailing a hand up her thigh, doesn't he?
Delightful. So what's also exciting about this hair look is that Farida said the style also had to work as a hair down without interrupting the scene. The simple style and lack of hair extensions was a conscious decision to echo the carriage scene, removing all the artifice in the key moments. So they basically wanted the hookup moments to have the hair down natural look, which is just beautiful.
This is true Penn.
Yeah.
I love this. It just gives us a bit of extra insight as well into the carriage look.
Yeah.
Overall, we've said this is one of our favourite looks. I have no doubt it will perform well in our Patreon outfit games.
Oh.
Penn is also wearing a beautifully sculpted, beribboned pink corset that we'll see again later this season. The piece was designed by John Glazer and George Sayer and constructed by Stephen Williams. It's made from Chantilly lace and has delicate boning and ribbons on the shoulders, which make it feel very Penelope.
And it ties into how beautifully shot this is, because we're in Penn's perspective, but we're seeing her through Colin's eyes.
Yeah.
And so we have all of these lingering moments where Penn is seeing herself and believing her own beauty and her own worth for the first time. So all of these decisions matter so much in creating that little bubble for her.
Jess Brownell also spoke of the importance of this scene by saying, the mirror scene is part of Penelope's arc about needing to allow herself to be seen because she hides so much. So when Colin turns her towards the mirror and is pointing out how beautiful she is inside and out, I think, in a deeper way, it's much more about seeing herself and allowing herself to be seen metaphorically more than literally. She also told the Bridgerton podcast, Penelope presents one side to the world and then she's a totally different person on the inside, as is Colin. Both of them are having to figure out how to merge the mirror self with the real self. We touched on this before, but there are also a few cut lines from the mirror speech. He originally said, you are the cleverest, bravest woman I have ever known. In a sea of small minds, you always hold true to yourself. With enough space in your heart to see others so clearly, you make me feel seen in ways I have never felt seen before.
In a sea of small minds, you always hold true to yourself with enough space in your heart to see others so clearly. Again, I think it's sort of depersonalizing it a little bit. I think it needs to be about him and Pen rather than anyone else sort of creeping into that moment with them.
Well, I also feel like the phrasing is a bit muddled and like overly complex too for like the other messages he's conveying to her here. I just feel like it's confusing and it just kind of pulls you out of the moment. So I think that's why they cut it. It's a bit awkwardly phrased.
Yeah. And I think as well, it says with enough space in your heart to see others so clearly. I think what matters is the way she sees him is unique to them rather than her like seeing
other people,
everyone the way she sees Colin. Like it depersonalizes it.
Yeah, I think they're trying to touch on the way that she, as Lady Whistledown, which she doesn't even know about yet, has this really great ability to see others and the world around her. Yeah. But, you know, they want to focus on the Polin of it all and just kind of hint at the Lady Whistledown.
The Whistledown. And you hold true to yourself also comes into the way she can't give Whistledown up.
Yep.
So maybe pulling a little bit of that dread out. As Colin confesses what he's been dreaming about, turns out that we got the more chaste PG-13 version of his fantasies back in 303. And his hand trails over her chest. Her hand meets his and...
As the scene description states, Pen can't take it any longer. She turns and kisses him hungrily. Colin pulls her flesh against his body, sending shivers down her spine. Their kisses grow downright graphic as desires pull and breath intermingles, self-control crumbling.
And then he says, you must tell me to stop if you do not wish for this.
And the scene description says that the hunger in Colin's eyes drives Pen crazy.
And she says, I do not wish for you to stop. I like that it's Pen that turns and sort of moves into that moment with him. They're so in it together.
I really love this moment of consent between Colin and Penelope. It's actually a continual thread during their intimacy scenes, and it's always handled in a way that heightens the passion between them.
Yeah, and same in season 2 with Cantony.
Yeah.
And again, the way it's shot with those bursts of light, which is so important to the whole theming of the season, about seeing each other and being exposed. And Colin turns Penelope back around to the mirror and begins undressing her. Her dress drops to the floor and pulls alongside Colin's pirate boats and her own hair.
Pirate boots.
You said pirate boats, babe.
Dear listeners.
The two blue pools have expanded and become a sea at their feet in which little boats are drifting about.
I spend a lot of time thinking about pirate boats. Pirate boots. And her own hairpin. Colin loosens her corset and we join them as they watch their own reflections as Penelope lets go of her corset, her hands quickly covering her chest, self-conscious. Jess Brownell talked about this moment saying, at first when she is nude in front of him, she is covering herself up, which is very much the way she operates in the world. She hides. And then as they begin to make love, Colin is encouraging her by helping her to understand how beautiful of a person she is, and she's able to uncover herself and reveal herself to him.
Oh.
And in fact, she really takes a lot of agency in that scene by saying, teach me. We will come back to this quote because she's so inexperienced. This is all brand new to her. And you can understand her sort of hiding away metaphorically and physically from him and then feeling emboldened and confident by being with him. But it is interesting about how much she's really revealing to him, I suppose. Yeah. As the room is filled with a soft glow of sunlight, a very fully clothed Colin, I have to say, babe, get stripping, leans down and whispers in her ear, lie down.
As many of you will already know, this line was a suggestion from Nicola Coughlan herself. Pen's eyes widen at his words and she heads to the chaise with POV by Ariana Grande slipping into the scene. Colin is about to start stripping, so I should probably take this moment to mention his costume while he still has it on.
Yeah.
So Colin is wearing a dark blue overcoat with an almost woolen look to the dark blue jacket underneath. So fans will also recognise his waistcoat here as one we've seen before, most notably in the 303 balloon scene. Dougie Hawkes said to InStyle that the stripes on his waistcoat were shifted around in tailoring, specifically to highlight Colin's muscles and also point to his exciting place.
Looks like we've arrived.
And this becomes super relevant in this scene, as we know. And he also has a very dark ruffled cravat, possibly hinting towards the depth of his desire for Pen.
Fun fact, this belt hilariously has a bee branded into it along with the words memento mori, which in Latin basically means remember you will die.
What the fuck?
And I find this absolutely hysterical that Colin is walking around with a belt that is reminding him of his mortality. But the Bridgertons have always been a bit weird about the bee symbolism, as we all know.
Yeah, that's what you want to hear before Le Petit Mort. Remember, you will die.
Fuck my life.
He's about to.
I guess much like Edmund, Colin's outfit is not long for this world,
Yes.
as all his clothes fall to the ground.
And I just want to comment on how well Nicola plays Pen's innocence when reacting to Colin undressing in this moment, with her eyes kind of shifting and flickering away and back. Nicola talked about this moment saying that Penelope might not have known what to expect with Colin's body, but that she likes what she sees. And you definitely see Penelope's eyes being drawn to the exciting place, as Dougie Hawkes would say. She clears her throat, still covering her chest as Colin is finally fully undressed. And then we get a blurry shot of a naked Colin shown in the mirror before he makes his way over to Penelope on the chaise. And Pen's growing confidence in this moment is also touched on in the scene description for this scene, which reads, Pen moves herself to the settee, continuing to hide herself with her hands, but as Colin finishes undressing himself and sits beside her on the settee, her confidence grows.
I like that scene description of him like sitting beside her. Just like, hi Pen.
Hey!
He says, you are so beautiful.
And the scene description continues by saying his confidence encourages her confidence as she now lets herself to be fully seen. Colin gently brushes the hair out of her face. He leans down to kiss her, pulling a blanket over them as he does. Pen looks up at him, a bit scared.
Tell me what to do.
I shall do everything.
No, tell me.
Yeah, that's good.
This is what Jess Brownell was talking about, with Penelope having a lot of agency in this scene, how much she wants to be an active participant. And it's also funny how this whole thing ties into the whole teaching storyline in season 3, where Colin is guiding Penelope through a new experience with his, get down on the chaise, but her wanting to learn and be a part of it.
Well, there's a little bit of a difference between lie down and get down. Get down, Penelope. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, even when she's sort of innocent, she's not a submissive party.
Yeah, she's curious, though. That's what she is in the world.
Also, just to revisit a point you made earlier, Pen telling Colin to instruct her is almost a direct callback to the cut portion of the dream with Penelope. She's basically walking out of his dream, wanting to continue their lessons in this more intimate moment.
This is like the book scene where it says...
She didn't know what she was supposed to do, but she knew she had to move. Her mother had already conducted her little talk, as she'd put it, and she told Penelope she must lie still beneath her husband and allow him his pleasures. But there was no way she could have remained motionless, no way she could have stopped her hips from pressing up against him, nor her legs from wrapping around his, and she didn't want to allow him his pleasures. She wanted to encourage them, to share them. She wanted them for herself as well.
Yeah. Get down, Penelope.
Yeah, and you totally see that being translated. Tell me what to do.
She said, urgency making her voice hoarse. Let me do everything, he said, breathing hard.
Breathe hard.
Ha!
No, you can't do that, actually. That's terrible. I regret that. No.
She insisted.
Tell me.
He stopped moving for the barest of moments, looking at her in surprise. Touch me, he said.
Where?
Anywhere.
And just like in the book, Pen's hands head straight down to the exciting place before Colin, more softly than he does in the book, tells her not there.
She was just following the arrows.
She's just following the arrows. It's crazy how much they almost directly translated this.
Yeah, honestly, they just lifted it straight from. It's really interesting. But it really is bringing that notion of Pen not wanting to just lay there and, be still.
Yeah.
Wanting to be an active participant. And even during the sex scene, when she reciprocates, it's a really good translation, I think.
And you can see kind of how much they were thinking about the original scene and Julia Quinn in the scene description for this moment, which reads, Pen's hands run over his body. A bit nervous, his back, his chest, and then growing bold from her arousal, she starts to move toward, as Julia Quinn would say, his member. Colin clears his throat, trying to hold it together. I also find it so funny how after Colin tells Pen that she can touch him, the way her eyes flicker immediately down to the place where her wandering hands will eventually reach, giving herself away.
She knows exactly
Where she wants to go.
where the money shot is, doesn't she? Yeah, she's like, this is brand new to me, but I know where I'm going.
Yeah.
And our lovely listener Sasha said, Colin had the revelation in the carriage that physical connection and touch meant so much more when it came with love and connection. The next day in the mirror scene, when Penn insists on participating actively in their intimacy, the thing he asks her to do is simply touch him. With his newfound revelation of what real intimacy is, that's all he wants. Oh, that's such a brilliant observation. It's like when she ran her hands through his hair. And it's that distance that he's felt with physical intimacy and emotional intimacy. And this is a brand new experience for her, but this is brand new for him as well.
A transformative moment for him as well. Yeah, from the carriage scene and then continued here. Yeah.
And Colin, ever the giver, slips his hand up her thigh under that very artfully placed blanket. Also, have to give a shout out to the blanket, which hopefully will be adorning the front of this episode cover if Lecky has anything to do with it.
How am I going to do that? I'll try to work it in there.
I don't know. You're going to have to, though.
Okay.
I mean, it's blue and fucking yellow.
Okay. Maybe a bee holding a little blanket, like Linus.
It'll be draped.
Okay.
But then he prepares her, as Julia Quinn would say. But then he stops, much to Penn's disappointment. But as he asks if she's ready, Penn realises that fingering ain't the only way to get there. She asks, is there more? Which is so again reminiscent of the book when Colin says,
there's much more, he whispered. Penelope didn't dare ask what.
That's hilarious.
Whereas here, Penelope asks, is there more? And
Colin smiles a devilish smile. Then
he says, this may hurt. I cannot help it, but I promise it's only this one time. Again, very, very book Colin.
Did you want me to read the scene description here?
Yeah, Lecky.
Okay.
Give us the whole thing, babe.
All right. We got a big chunky paragraph of Mira's scene description here.
Straight from the scripts.
Penn nods. Colin positions himself on top of her and slowly enters her. Slowly. Okay, I just have to say, somebody on Reddit, when I shared the scene description for this initially, they commented that Colin enters her slowly is basically the equivalent of like Harry Potter when they're making fun of how Dumbledore shouts at Harry, like, did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
Did you put your name in the goblet of fire?
Because he does not enter her slowly.
Dumbledore said calmly, enters her slowly.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, continuing, she breathes and then winces briefly, her fingers pressing into his shoulders. But keeping a watch to see that she is all right, Colin continues. Realizing she is feeling pleasure, not pain, the rhythm intensifies. We can tell from the look on Colin's face that this has never felt so good, and despite being her first time, Penn is in heaven. As their eyes connect, full of love, we artfully cut through time, so we know that this is no quickie. Tenderness intensifies into need until eventually Penn's breath quickens before her eyes shut tight as she orgasms. Colin tries his damnedest to hold it together to watch her pleasure, but he comes quickly after her. And then there is a full moment of silence before a huge smile comes on both of their faces, and a little light, joyful laughter. Colin looks at her, confident but playful. This is very reminiscent of the end of the carriage scene, where like immediately they transition into the joyful smiles and laughter after sharing that moment.
Yeah. And Jess Brownell, the showrunner, talked about how she really wanted people to see that on screen, that sex doesn't always have to be torturous and it can be passionate but
playful.
Yeah, but here with them two is playful and joyous. And Jess even said that she hopes that everyone has an experience like that is the fun side of love. And it comes from them knowing each other so deeply for so long. The foundations that they built that on.
Yeah.
And of course, it is quite the sequence. In fact, I think it's like the second longest sex scene on TV ever or something. It's up there.
It definitely stretches on for a long time when you're watching it, especially the first time. You're like, oh my God. Like, you feel like you're intruding, and then it's also very long. Yeah.
Babe, we fucking saw it in the cinema when we knew the cast were around.
Oh, right.
That's when I was like, veg, never look at me again. But it is so artfully done. It's so beautifully done. There's so many character moments within that. And I think, again, it's the way that Colin doesn't let himself get fully lost in that moment until he checks with Penn, asks if he's all right, the way he's constantly checking in on her. And then, of course, that moment when Penn starts responding to Colin. My God.
And during the act itself, we see that Penelope is also really bold in grabbing Colin and pulling him close, asking him to tell her what to do. It's a really beautiful depiction of how they are both equals in this intimate moment, even if it's new to Penn. Of course, this is very new to Colin, too, in that he's never had the same physical connection while also feeling emotionally in that moment with his partner. But she's just as into the moment as he is and returns that passion.
And he gets so much from seeing how into it she is. It's like, she wants me after all.
Yeah.
Even if she won't use her fucking words.
Yeah, even though she was mute earlier clear she's responding enough now to satisfy him. But you all know we love some hand moments, and I just have to call out some of the amazing hand acting in the scene. Sorry. But the way that Colin briefly cradles the back of Pen's head, a gesture she kind of returns at the end, running her own hands through the back of his hair before caressing his arm, his chest, his face. And if you look closely at Colin's arm in the frame, his arm also shifts, which makes it appear as though he's reaching back to give her a helping hand, so to speak. Even the way that Pen kind of attempts to grab Colin in shock as she climaxes, but ends up almost like lightly slapping him, which helps sell the idea that this is Pen's first sexual experience in a way that feels very realistic and intimate as well.
Yeah, and Sasha commented on this saying the way he keeps his eyes open as he's finishing so that he can watch and experience her pleasure is so beautiful.
Yeah.
For him, his pleasure comes in part from the pleasure he's giving her.
Yep.
And that's how it ends, with that sweet laughter at the end that's so Polin. Colin checking in on her again and Pen assuring him that it was perfect. It's quite like a groundbreaking representation of sex on screen, I think.
Yeah.
Like, especially a first time in that way.
Yeah, it is. And I think in media, there's often either the inexperience of the character or characters doesn't act as a barrier, and very much the raw sexuality of the characters takes over for them. So I think we saw that a bit more, not to an unrealistic degree, but something like Cantony was a bit closer to that, you know.
Yeah.
They knew what to do. I guess he's had plenty of sex, but so's Colin by now. But just thinking about, it's either that in media or it goes the other way and it's like really awkward. It's almost comedic, like in some coming of age films. But I thought this felt really real.
Almost too real.
Yeah, it felt really realistic, and like the communication they had was lovely, and the way that he sort of warned her, and it did read like, you know, your first time in a uni bed situation. So it was really sweet.
But it was still pleasurable and they were together in it, even though their experience levels didn't match.
Yeah. And it wasn't super realistic that Pen would vaginally come the first time, but that one was for the fans.
As you were speaking, I also had a funny thought that it's really amusing how Colin and Antony's love interest, like, both know what they really like. Like, Penelope knows that Colin really likes when she, like, strokes his hair or whatever. And then for Kate, she, like, sticks her finger in Antony's mouth or whatever during that gazebo scene. Do you remember?
Whoa, I didn't know where we were going there.
She does.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, I mean, it's like a really central detail. I can't remember if it's in the initial gazebo scene or when she's dreaming of it later.
Yeah, the flashback.
But it's clearly, like, something that probably Antony likes. It's just funny. Sorry.
Yeah, and we talked so much about how experienced Colin would be going into the series. And obviously, we know that he ended up being quite experienced. But I think what's nice about this scene is it is a first for both of them in different ways. Yeah. And I think we feel that this is something he's never experienced before. But we have to talk about that chaise longue, don't we?
Yeah.
The Shorty-nominated chaise longue. For months, the only hint we were being given about season 3 on repeat is that Nicola and Luke broke a piece of furniture while filming. That was literally it. And fans had to keep guessing for months what kind of furniture it was. Was it a settee? Was it a bed? Was it a table? Was it a desk? Every combination. And then sometimes Nicola would give extra hints like, you wouldn't find it in your kitchen unless you had a fancy kitchen or whatever. And even more lore, if you remember, all the way back when they were filming, Nicola once used the song Chaise Longue by Wet Leg as a song during filming. So everyone was like, oh my God, is it the chaise? Yeah. And our listener Gina said, did any of you guess right which piece of furniture they broke?
Can't remember.
Listeners, you can look it up.
I think we must have done. There was only so many it could be.
We definitely mentioned chaise at some point.
Yeah.
But we talked about it. Please, if you're dedicated, you can find it in our transcripts.
Yeah, we've said a lot. Who knows? But
yeah.
And there is obviously the infamous photo of it being broken. And there was even the notion that they might have kept it in as the actual scene. However, Nicola broke into her normal accent. And so they wouldn't have been able to keep that scene because they felt it was a very Polin moment that would happen and that they both laugh about it. But sadly, it's on the cutting room floor, along with the chaise itself.
Couldn't they have dubbed over her?
That's a good point. Also, just FYI, the Shays Speaking Out video sadly lost at the Shorty Awards, but Flonase won in its category. So you win some, you lose some.
Well. Anyway, and then the other notable thing about the chaise is that this is specifically something that book Colin wouldn't do. So if we head back to a little settee moment from the book.
He groaned, letting his hips sink against hers for one delicious moment before heaving himself off. He couldn't take her now. She was going to be his wife. There would be plenty of time for midday tumbles on illicit sofas, but he owed it to her to use a bed, for the first time at least.
Well,
So, but Colin got a one-up on show Colin there, perhaps. I think they are very different contexts. For a start, realistically, the Polin height difference is a player in this, I think. Like, you have to make it work in a non-awkward way. But I do like the idea that Book Colin would be really pissed at his younger self if he found out how he took Pen's virginity. But I think in show Colin's defence, Book Colin was more worried because they were literally in Violet's house in the middle of the day and anyone could have walked in. So it would have had to been super, super quick and not great. And also points for show Colin because at least he knows he loves Penelope in this scene. Whereas, as we said before, Book Colin was on top of her, still having a think. And I think he'd probably reprimand his show self for not making it 2 seconds to the bed. However, he told her to lay down. He didn't specify where. He didn't say lay down on the chaise. Didn't say lay down on the bed. She chose a location.
True.
Would it even be comfy? Who knows?
I guess, yeah, there was a desk, some tables, some other things. There's like a rolled up piece of fabric in the back room that looks like it has like a face, like an Easter Island type face. Just FYI.
Yeah, why did she go to the bed? I suppose it had a lot of dust sheets on it, didn't it?
Yeah. Or she thought she was being watched by the blanket face. Also, maybe Colin didn't correct her because he knew about Antony and Sienna and wasn't sure if the mattress had been replaced.
From her experience, they've done what she seems to think sex is in a carriage on benches.
Yeah, that's a good point. She's like, we were sat down for that, so I assume that's what we're doing again.
Yeah.
This is plenty of space, yeah.
But in general, I think as a first time scene, it's so beautifully shot. It's romantic, gentle, passionate, but sweeping, and there's so much discovery and joy. Mm-hmm. And they're really swept up in their passion, but there's constant consent, and Colin guides her through, whilst you also see the significance for him. So I think it's done really, really well.
It's also funny because I bet she's not taking their height difference into account either. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's not...
Who, Pen?
Yeah, when she goes to sit down, she's not thinking like, there's no way Colin's going to fit on this either. You know what I mean?
Well, she doesn't know what was going to go where, I suppose.
Yeah.
She's like, hang on a minute. It cannot have been comfy, though. You can't convince me.
No.
It's very solid back. I always think about, I'm like, girl, that's not going to do your back any good. And then, of course, we have the canon that Pen conceives an unnamed baby Lord Featherington in this scene. Do you mind? Do you mind that she's pregnant for the rest of the season?
Do I mind? No, I think it's funny. I mean, like, Colin knows what he wants. He goes after it. And we all know he wanted to be part of a Featherington family. He's just ensuring that happens as quickly as possible.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Ever fertile, aren't they? Bless them.
It'd also be hilarious if there was like a cut scene. There's not. I'm just saying, imagine if there were like a cut scene while they're like canoodling afterward and she's telling him about the air race or whatever. And he's like, huh. And, and then they end up going several more rounds. But anyway.
Yeah. But I suppose you have the significance that he's never done that before with someone.
Yeah.
And in his head, he didn't even question it because they're going to be married.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it wasn't even like a decision like, are we going to do this now or not? Am I going to pull a Simon on this?
Yeah. I mean, she's already his wife, like, in his mind.
Yeah. And then there is the notion of Pen doesn't really know the consequences of that. But right. I don't think that's sort of the tone of the scene, I think.
No, not at all.
As far as he knows, like, they're going to get married and spend their life together.
Aww. Yeah, they're just expressing their passion for each other.
But, he will bring it up in the rainbow fish scene. So we'll get there when we do.
Actually, the rainbow fish scene is how I'd rather that be known. So
one thing, of course, about this scene, we've talked a lot about how much it's taking directly from the book with their first time. However, it's combining the notion of the mirror with it. And so, as we've said, the mirror scene was never in the book. And so, therefore, the mirror itself was never part of their first time.
Right.
So how do we feel about the two of them being combined into the one? How do we feel that the mirror scene is directly entwined with it being their first time? Because Jess Brownell said, mirrors this season have been a really handy metaphor for us. If you think about the mirror as a metaphor for two selves, there's a self who is standing in front of the mirror, who is your private self, who you truly are. And then the self who's reflected in the mirror, the person you show the world. For both Penelope and Colin, their arcs this season are, in many ways, about merging those two selves. And so we've planted images of mirrors all throughout the season. And of course, it all comes to fruition in the big mirror moment.
I think that they chose to continue what they did in part one, which is separate the Lady Whistledown issue from Polin's love story in this scene, the significant first time scene for them. So this scene with her staring into the mirror and Colin telling her how beautiful he finds her and how beautiful he wants her to see herself. It's about Penelope and it's not about Lady Whistledown. But I think a lot of us really hoped that the Lady Whistledown issue would be tackled before Polin were intimate in this way, especially before the mirror scene happened, because mirrors have been used in past seasons to demonstrate Pen's dual identity, as we've said. But the mirror in this scene is reflecting Pen's true self and showing her that Colin sees who she truly is. And I think something is lost because he is not aware of her secret identity at that point. Obviously, that's used for drama at the end of the scene where we finally see her taking in her reflection and realizing she hadn't been completely truthful with him and that he hadn't seen her complete self. But yeah, obviously they wanted to go for the most dramatic approach possible, but I always wish that they had tackled the Lady Whistledown issue before the mirror scene specifically, so they could have seen each other fully in that moment.
Yeah, which always felt like the point of the mirror symbolism, because the mirror imagery has been in the show since day one. We traced it, we had a tracker, we were following it constantly, and it was always tied to Penelope and Whistledown. And so to have the mirror imagery removed from Lady Whistledown in such a key moment as physical intimacy with someone who you're going to spend the rest of your life with, I never would have imagined that that's how it would have gone.
Yeah.
And I think we were told that the mirror scene was going to be in episode 5, like we found out somehow. And we were like, oh, he's not going to know. And our listener Moonpie said, related to the notion of timelines, the 2 major intimacy scenes of season 3 are smack in the middle of the season, about 15 minutes apart if you're watching episodes back to back. Imagine being Pen and being that 12 hours for her. Where would you put the mirror scene if you wanted to move it? I think I prefer it as the wedding night if the story was to remain more or less the same, and remove the relationship angst in episode 8, allowing for Polin against the world. Alternatively, I would have left episode 5 a bit lighter, maybe rings, bands, engagement, with Colin overhearing Pen and Elle talking about Whistledown at the end. This could have dropped the angst into episode 6 with the mirror scene, i.e. everyone is fully exposed at the end of the episode.
I would have included it in episode 8, because that's when he's fully worked through his feelings about Lady Whistledown, and they could be their true selves with each other then. I wouldn't have put it in episode 7, and I've even said in episode 8, like that moment, the hot, cold shoulder moment.
Yeah.
I did want a moment there where maybe he gave her his journals to kind of connect them emotionally, but I don't think they should have had like that physical connection again until like the mirror scene. So I would have liked that, I think, in episode 8.
I think we'll probably talk about it in the future as to how we would have changed the storyline of part 2.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even the storyline, maybe like the pacing.
I just think that this moment of physical connection between them, this intimacy where they fully see each other's selves and accept each other, it makes sense for me as an episode 8 moment.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, like, we would have had to have changed the whole storyline, I think, because they don't reconcile to the end. But imagine a world where all of this angst was sorted by like episode 7. And then, as you say, episode 8, it's Polin against the world, against the blackmail plot. And that's the moment that they could be more reconciled and then have this physical intimacy of exposure.
No, I'm saying if I didn't change anything, I would have put it in episode 8.
Yeah. But if you did change it.
If I was changing it, I would put it 6 or 7.
Yeah. 6 or 7.
Yeah.
But that would have to be completely reconfiguring everything.
Yeah, for sure.
And Colin accepting her Whistledown self,
Yeah.
which is what the whole imagery of the mirror felt like it was leading to, but alas. And then how do we feel about the first time being before he knows about Lady Whistledown?
Not great.
I remember we figured that out and it was like, oh no.
Yeah, we knew that the fallout was going to be terrible. And like, you know, it's what Bridgerton does.
Yeah.
I feel like as a romance fan, sometimes like my one critique of Bridgerton is that it skews more heavily toward the drama over the romance at times.
It will elevate drama over the narrative.
And I would like more romance, but you know, people like drama. So it's not my cup of tea. And, you know, I still love the season, but I would have liked him to have known.
Because this is really difficult, because when you're talking about the mirror scene, the way that it is in the show now is that when he's showing her reflection in the mirror, he's like, this is all of you. This is what I see. This is what I love. And it's supposed to be about Pen being vulnerable and being raw and being honest about herself. Yep. And it's like, does this work when she's not being any of those things?
Yeah.
She's not being fully vulnerable. She's not being her true self. Colin isn't recognizing her true self. I mean, he is in a way that he recognizes the qualities, but he isn't saying this with full knowledge of everything.
Yeah, it's the same thing as her confession in 306 about how she loves him, with the Lady Whistledown still hanging over their heads. It colors that in a way, like the scene is beautiful. I still love it. I love that scene.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is, the fact that she hasn't told him diminishes that moment a little bit, because she's still not being completely honest with him when she's bearing her soul and saying, I love you.
And it's what Eloise said, he cannot love you until he truly knows you.
Yeah.
And I think he does know her and he sees the qualities, but he still doesn't know the truth.
Because she's deceiving him. Yeah.
And we have to think about Colin in the mirror scene, because this is Colin giving everything to her while she is the whole time holding something back.
Yeah.
Because as much as we discuss the mirror in relation to Pen's identity and Pen being seen and seeing herself, it is also about Colin. He has been fully raw and vulnerable with her in the carriage. And most of all, he finds so much safety in that, because he thinks that Penelope fully sees him and that he fully sees her. And he finds so much security in their past, in how much they know each other. Whereas now you know as a viewer that he doesn't know something and that he's going into this sex scene where he literally gives everything to her without knowing the truth. And I think it would have been a far more even playing field for them if they slept together when he did know her identity.
100%.
Because it leads them both to the entrapment line.
Yeah.
He doesn't mean it, but it's understandable how they arrive at that moment where that's how he has to sort of call it.
Yeah.
You also had the idea that Penn clearly didn't know what the full extent of sex meant. So we know that Penn isn't entrapping Colin. We know that's not what it is, but it's almost not fair to either of them that they're in that situation where that's how it could be turned. And so the way I fall down on the mirror scene ultimately, and by mirror scene I'm saying this whole sequence from when they get there, I think it works beautifully as a first time scene.
Yes.
In terms of the way it's shot and delivered and the way it's handled, all of that. I think it's better than it is in the books where they've just had this really big fight and he decides that he loves her in that moment. I think it works better than that.
Yeah.
So it works as a first time scene. It doesn't work as a mirror scene.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's not taking away from the way it's shot or anything like that or produced. It's narratively.
Yeah, and I feel like even the intention of using that mirror to focus on Penelope is a beautiful choice, but I feel like it would have been more poignant and impactful.
And powerful.
Yeah.
If it was tied into Whistledown.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think the mirror scene always should have been post Whistledown reveal. It'd have been okay if they'd have had their first time and then they had the mirror scene separately.
Yeah.
So we'd have had Polin against the world instead of Penn and Colin spending the rest of the time completely divided. Yeah. It would have been an opportunity for Colin to show Penelope that he was fully accepting her dual identity instead of kind of shoehorned into the end. Like it would have been him standing here in front of the mirror saying, everything that's happened, everything we've been through, I fully accept you and love you and I stand with you now. And let me show you that I do. I also think it could have been played as like a passionate sex scene that was like quite fiery, as opposed to this scene, which is beautiful, but very, very soft and gentle and delicate.
Yeah.
And that leads me to talk about, of course, the mirror promo that dropped, I don't even know, like last April? Who knows? We have a whole episode. What a way to look in a mirror.
Yeah.
Beans was making cheese throughout it. So you can understand the combination. And I hate to say it, but I miss that mirror promo energy not being in the show.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I wish that promo had been in the season later on as the mirror scene.
I agree. But you know what's so special about the mirror promo is that it's very much like a romance book come to life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it delivers, it's almost like very soapy, even in the way it's shot. It's beautiful. I think it's maybe the best like promo they've ever done.
Oh, it's so good.
It so perfectly teases the Polin season.
We were stunned.
Yeah, it was one of the surreal moments of the promo cycle for us.
Yeah.
Because like the level of the passion and like the heat was incredible.
Just through gazes and just light hand touching. It's so good. Yeah.
And that is absolutely not to take away from the way it was shot here at all. I just wish that like we'd had a mirror scene in itself that had been about Whistledown and Colin.
Yeah.
But I will say, for first time, it's really beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
And our listener Tiff pointed out that Nicola has mentioned that Penelope in the carriage scene goes through so many emotions in the space of 5 minutes. I would argue that the mirror scene does as well. And I think it's a little masterpiece between the overwhelming feelings of gratitude that Penn had, Colin's reassurances, the speech in front of the mirror that emboldens Penn, horniness, and then turning to the tender, empowering sex that they had with surprise, vulnerability, release, followed by laughter. That was truly such an incredible scene. And I loved how they used POV as a song because the lyrics could not be more perfect for Penn's journey into the light. And again, on this topic of music, Murphin's mama said, POV was a gorgeous choice for the mirror scene, and we even got a beautiful segue into a love based on friendship as the cue. What other songs did you wish to hear during the scene? I think all of our ideas for music in a mirror scene had been in a very different context, as we've said. So I don't know that any of our ideas would have worked.
Yeah, we were just talking about, like, we thought it'd be a more passionate scene as opposed to, like, this really tender first time.
But POV works really beautifully.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
It's so tender and earnest. Do you remember there was a leak? Oh, there were so many fucking leaks. But there was a leak of this scene where there was only the audio.
Yeah.
God help us all. And we couldn't figure out what the music was.
I figured it out.
That was the one that I was sick of leaks, and that came out, and I was like, I'm sorry, guys, I refuse to listen to this.
All right.
I remember just being like, no, that's enough leaks.
Actually, Beans and I figured this out, and I remember being pretty proud of myself because I know, like, no Ariana songs, but Beans was able to figure out that it was an Ariana song, and I was able to find which one, and I was really proud of myself.
Oh, good job.
I had no idea what was going on.
Oh, well.
And then Moonpie said, are you able to make heads and tails of the timeline that took place from the dance interruption to the alleged conception of Lord Featherington? There was a lot going on, and it takes time between each thing.
Nah.
Well, I think Portia gave us the best clue. So I think last night was last night. She got in early hours of the morning, as Portia says. She hid out in her room all day, which gave Colin time to sort his house out.
Yeah.
Anthony arrive home. All of that to happen. So I think this is like late afternoon.
Yeah.
And that gorgeous late sunlight bursting through the room.
Less than 24 hours. Yeah.
Less than 24 hours and she's knocked up, guys.
Yeah.
He doesn't mess around, does he?
No.
And oh my God, deep breath. That is the end of the mirror scene. Okay, Lecky. We're going to cut the episode there. We might have reached a happy ending to stop the episode on if all goes to plan.
Interesting commentary based on where we left off.
I think Pen and Colin would disagree. I think they're having a great old time. So let's leave our two lovers and the little dalliance on the chaise. And in our next episode, we'll pick right back up
With Cantony canoodling.
Cantony canoodling, Pen and Colin on the chaise again. We'll get back in a carriage.
We'll actually get clocks next time.
I feel like this was misadvertisement. We will be back at some point with our next episode, which again might be quite long.
We're working on it.
It's been recorded about 5 different sessions. We're working on it. So stay tuned for charades, a ticking clock, and a deadline, which thankfully we don't have because we would not meet it.
Yeah.
I'm very poor with deadlines.
Thank you for bearing with us for the long wait for this episode and the next one, potentially.
But you know, season 4 is not coming around anytime soon. So until our next episode, where can everyone find us, Lek?
You can find us at Whatabarb Pod on Instagram and TikTok.
And Veg isn't here for this bit, so can you do her part?
Yes, if you'd like to listen to your podcast, we're available on all podcast platforms. And if you prefer a more audio-visual experience, you can also find our podcast on YouTube.
And if you'd like to support the pod, come hang out with us for hopefully more frequent postings than we do with our episodes. You can come find us over at patreon.com/whatabarbpod, where there's occasional bonus bits, a life update from Beans, which is slightly depressing, all sorts. Who won the outfit game the other day?
I think it was Romantic Pen.
That is... Now, Patreon people, I love you very much, but that feels personal, actually.
Oh, you did make a good case for it, but yeah, they're both great outfits.
Really fun outfit games that usually upset one of us at some point.
Break our hearts.
I'll cheer myself up by going to writing a post about Colin in various states of distress.
Despair, yeah.
Yeah, which is your favourite Colin of that one? Out of the Concur Colin, the brothel Colin, and corpse Colin looking like Ophelia.
Right, yeah. Probably corpse Ophelia Colin.
It is great, isn't it?
He delivers. Luke Newton delivers in that scene. That's all you have to say.
We wanted a nightly scene.
Yeah.
Well, come join us for all of the above. But until then, Beans, who will be with us next episode at some point, do us the honour and sing us out. I wonder what she's going to do for this episode. There has to be something mirrory.
Yeah, the Justin Timberlake song.
Oh, I went to the... Do, with the man in the mirror.
Oh, Michael Jackson?
That one.
One of those.
Good luck, Beans.
Yeah.
It's like you're my mirror standing back at me. It's like you're my mirror staring back at me. Oh, I only know those lyrics. There you go. That's the violin. Do 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 do. Do 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 do.